we'll start with the aphorism 10 because that's where we kind of stopped last time. So in aphorism 10, my reading was that uncertainty is really the reality of things rather than the nothingness. Usually, nihilists get into the mindset of thinking that all interpretation have are valid in their own right, and so it's the same as not believing in anything. Everything is meaningless, and it just goes down that rabbit hole of like, what's the point when nothing makes sense? Like nothing is real. And that's the true nature of things, is that nothing matters and there's no meaning. And it's more here in this argument. He argues that there is a it's the uncertainty is the reality rather than nothingness, because there are so many possibilities to pick from, rather than there being nothing. So it's more of an abundance rather than a lack. Um, that's how I see it, which is the case. I would say is that it's more like there's multiple roads in front of you rather than one correct way to live life, and that's the opposite of what a lot of nihilists might believe, which is that there is no road ahead of you, and it's just a meaningless existence. Anybody else have more to share about aphorism 10?
I agree with you. I think it's very important to think because I think religion isn't like a bad thing at face value. Back when I was a Christian, um, I did see it as like very reminiscent of like classical Stoicism, Christian faith and teaching. But it comes with the added baggage of you have to believe this or else you go to hell. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think there's a need to be curious in the face of nihilism as you're describing, and not just get lost in the sauce of like, oh, this is all incorrect, so therefore I don't believe in anything. I'm just gonna be stagnant.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, there's an author, Edmund Burke, who wrote about the revolutions in France, and he said freedom can be a prison with no walls for some people because they don't know how to handle true creativity or true freedom.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think Nietzsche mentions elsewhere how it's like a boat going into an open sea. It's like you could be like, "Oh my God, there's nothing out here," or you could say like, "Wow, there's so many beautiful possibilities of where we could go because all of it is open to us." So it's really a matter of perspective, I guess. Um, Nietzsche also mentions how uh, they they ultimately prefer a handful of certainty to a whole carload of beautiful possibilities, and they think of this as a sign of strength to mention it as if, oh, there is nothing, but it's really that's stating it as a courageous gesture, but it's really out of weakness because they yeah, which is and then what was it, another line where he mentions so let me scroll it down here. Yeah, there is a mistrust of these modern ideas in this attitude of disbelief in all that has been constructed yesterday and today. So it's all the values that exist now, or whatever we believe in. They're they're just it's an idea of not trusting any of those, and rejecting all of those, which is part of it. But you also shouldn't reject it. They saying that there is nothing there. It's more like it's up to you to see all the other possibilities that also exist in it. Um,
That runs a bit counterintuitive to my conception of Nietzsche, where he is pretty adamant about wanting to bring forth the overman. So I'm not sure how much
so
openness there is in Nietzsche's mind.
I think he mentions it in a different aphorism. How like if you have a different interpretation, so be it. Kind of, I forget which one it was. It's in one of the readings. I'll try to pull it up.
If
Uh,
I oh, so,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so it's okay to have multiple interpretations. The point is to constantly challenge each other's interpretations, and if you have a better interpretation, go for it. Nietzsche doesn't claim that his interpretation is the most accurate one. Um, and I'm trying to see where he said that. Um, yeah, I think that's where people also get struggle with. It's like, oh well, Nietzsche claims that there is no such thing as truth, absolute truth. Then he then brings up Overman. Then he brings up all these other ideas that he states like, oh, this is how the world is. So how does that make sense when you're saying that there is nothing and there's also this. So I think that's where it's kind of good to understand his perspective of like he's not saying there isn't nothing. He's saying that there's a lot of possibilities, and this is Nietzsche's interpretation, and all he wants are not followers, but people who go, okay, Nietzsche was wrong, so and so, and come up with even grander interpretations, or oppose him, challenge him, right, rather than just like say, yeah, that's it because Nietzsche said so, which is unfortunately a lot of what people do. But he doesn't want followers. Is the point I would say from here? Is that
Well, I
make
think he wants followers, but he wants living followers. I think that's his
like?
point in Zarathustra, right?
But you want to elaborate a little on that? What he means by living
Well,
followers?
where on the marketplace he picks up this dead rope dancer and buries him, and then Zarathustra, and
Mm-hmm.
then he points out or has the epiphany that he needs living followers.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
think his the whole appeal that he was making towards like actively questioning him, that is the symbol of, or being a living follower is the symbol of that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. This is jumping a little ahead, but just to point out the aphorism that I was referring to. It's in 21 of the first book, first part itself. It says that. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, he says, as a matter of fact, blah blah blah. Wait, still pulling it up. Thought I had it. Yeah, but it says suppose this is also an interpretation, and you'll be eager enough to make this objection. Well, so much the better. So it's like challenge him. I guess that's kind of what the living followers idea is. His other saying is like, "What good does a pupil do to a student do to a teacher if he continues to always be a pupil, but never grows out of it, and he always stays as a student that of that person?" And I think lot of his arguments against scholars is the same, in the same vein of like people who are just continuing to just rehash the same things that the teacher has said rather than bringing new things to the table or challenging the teacher with their own ideas, with their own you know sense of understanding and interpretations. Anything else people want to share about aphorism 10? If not, we'll go to the next one. Here, let's see, my note, it says, instead of asking why a priori, we should ask if it's necessary to even believe in that. So he, let's see, it's kind of, they're constantly asking, like Kant is asking here, how are synthetic judgments a priori possible? And then he goes into answering that by saying virtue of my faculty or virtue of faculty, because I'm able to think about it. That's how a priori exists. And Nietzsche kind of argues here, like, instead of asking why it exists, like how it exists, we should ask like why it does need to exist at all. Why it's necessary to believe in such a thing. See if anything else. Yeah, they thought that they were discovering new faculties when they were just inventing them, and that's kind of what a lot of metaphysical thinking is, that they go and be like, oh, this is the way that the world is, or this is how things are, and it's oftentimes it's kind of what they wish for being stated as such, as if it's always evidently true, or it's like always been the case, when they're just making it up. Yeah. This is the line that I'm talking about, when one could not yet distinguish between finding and inventing. And here he argues, by virtue of a faculty is Kant's answer. And he said, but is that an answer, an explanation, or is it merely a repetition of the question? How does opium induce sleep by virtue of a faculty? He's just saying it's circular logic in terms of like almost similar to I think therefore I am. It's just somewhat circular, being like, oh, this is the case because I believe so. It doesn't quite give you an answer. See. Yeah, another interesting point here is synthetic judgments a priori should not be possible at all. We should have no right to them. In our mouths, they're nothing but false judgment. Only, of course, the belief in their truth is necessary as a foreground belief and a visual evidence belonging to the perspective optics of life. You have to ask, why do we? It's not like it shouldn't be just considered as true. We should instead ask, why do we believe in it in the first place? Why is it necessary as a foreground belief in order for the perspective of life? And this kind of channels a little bit for me into Jungian thought as well, because Jung would look at the supernatural beliefs that people have, and instead of asking, for evidence or all these other things, he would ask, like, what kind of people believe in these beliefs? What makes them? What physiological life or whatnot have they lived that lead to these beliefs to happen? And it's similar here, where Nietzsche says, like, you have to look at if that belief is necessary for their perspective of life, rather than rather than just considering it as true. Yeah, so which I loved how Jung looks at it, because then you look at Christianity or any other religion where normally you would just be like, oh, this is rubbish, or argue against it. But if you look at it from the perspective of what do these believers get from it, like why do they feel the need to believe in such things from their perspective, that gives you more information than just looking at the statements that they believe in as facts or lies, or argue that relentlessly forever. Anything else to add?
Oh, I was going to, sorry, I got cut off. I was going to say, in relation to Superman, when you remove these kind of axioms of how to think and behave ahead of time, you allow creativity to flow. And from creativity is competition. A very, very easy example is like MMA, for instance. Before MMA, there's like Kung Fu and boxing and karate, very stylized, specific approaches to fighting that people all championed as the best way. And then someone just said, let's just throw it all in the ring and see what you guys can do. Let's see what wins. And as a result, we've had a new sport evolve from nothing. So if no one is following pre-made belief systems and they compete amongst each other, you have the best of these creative endeavors emerge, and that could
Yeah.
be the Superman essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So that's more the idea of Ubermensch, is that the competition between these ideas coming to that belief. And so if you're just like, oh no, that doesn't make any sense, well, go ahead, argue with it and challenge it with the different belief that's, a different interpretation of life, and that's fine too. And it's not like he's claiming that this is better than everything else forever, but challenge him with something rather than nothing and say that nothing is better. I don't really have notes for Aphorism 12, so if anybody wants to share anything, feel free. Mm, did anyone say something?
Nope.
All right. Then we'll go on to the next one. Which is Aphorism 13. Let's see if I have something on there. Yeah, Aphorism 13. Let me scroll down over here. Yeah, okay. Aphorism 13, I talk about, and he talks about how self-preservation is not what drives us, but rather simply it's an indirect result of the will to power. A living thing seeks above all to discharge a strength, which is really a great way of understanding what will to power is. It's a discharging of strength. It's um, and when you see it as such, it really opens your doors to thinking in terms of understanding it better. Yeah, but that, yeah, it's I love this whole idea of like the accumulation of energy that happens either in one's lifetime or through multiple generations. In the case of Napoleon, um, that then discharges itself like a bomb if it's multiple generation, and that is will to power in a sense, which is really cool. And a lot to dive into here is also like how that energy builds up. What makes certain people want to discharge their energy, and other people um, turn it inward and grow into resentment and become more slave-like in their behavior. So it's really interesting to see how what makes a certain type of person go one direction than the other.
It loops back into, I think you can see like a social, like a quasi-Darwinism. Everyone has a will to power. Everyone has a desire to be the best.
Yeah,
You can even say slave morality is born out of envy or jealousy, because people want the latest cars, clothes, technology, power, money, and they're envious of people on the top who have that. So I would even say envy is a manifestation of the will to power in a negative way, but it still shows that it's present in everyone, and it can
yeah,
manifest in how you dominate in the world or how you become resentful and envious of others in the world.
yeah. It could be a positive thing to be envious. I think the I forget, but I think in with Greeks it was considered a positive thing, so that you can use that to channel yourself to become better. And but yeah, the only thing I would say is that it's not in a Hegelian sense of like you have to discharge your like the other the other basically makes you compete against them. It's more that you, by your very nature, want to be different. You want to discharge your strength and discharge your energy, and in a way, the other creates the circumstances that leads to that. It's not quite that you do it to win them over or whatnot. It's more like that's you by your very nature, and you want to express yourself like an artist does. It's more like a need that you have within you to express yourself in one form or another. Um, we're at aphorism 13, by the way, if you want to follow along. And we're talking about how will to power is about discharging strength and self-preservation, which is more of the argument that Darwinism, Darwin had argued earlier on, is not the actual thing that drives things. It's more an indirect result of the will to power. I also love how like there are so many scientists trying to study Darwinism, and I don't know. I feel like once you realize it, it's more obvious that it's not just we don't just live to live, just propagate the species for the sake of it. But I guess you have to be a philosopher to really go that far.
Oh yeah, I don't mean Darwinism as in like the literal evolutionary kind. I mean kind of just how ideas evolve, even art evolves. I think film is very fascinating because film was born in the last 100 years, and since then it's been evolving into different variations of genres of film and
Mm.
different styles visually and musically. And there's a Darwinism of everyone competing to make the best film through the will to power as artists. So I don't mean it like in the
No,
the literal
I agree with
Charles
that.
Darwin sense.
Yeah, the only
Kind
part
of
I
like,
would
sorry.
go ahead.
It's kind of
Go
like
ahead.
it's kind of like with Nietzsche when he was saying, the whole thing with reading and writing, like reading and writing has its own kind of will to power, kind of like video, you know what I mean? Like video has its own form of expression, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
theater, but in a different way, sort of, you know what I mean? So I agree with that
yeah,
statement
but
about
this is interesting in that this is where I think there's a distinction between like Hegelian thinking and Nietzschean thinking, which is that Hegel would have proposed more like, oh, you need you you're kind of um, seeing yourself as part of a relation to this other. That is because you're competing with the other that makes you realize more of
Oh,
who
right,
you are.
right.
All
Yeah,
this
no,
like
I feel
that,
you.
and
Whereas
that
the will to
relationship.
power is just like
This is who you are, and
right,
the others might make it more obvious, because of the pathos of difference and wanting to be different from them and wanting to discharge your energy and not just be at the same level at them as them. But it's that others make it more clear that you're different rather than others giving you
right.
meaning.
It's like, hey, I realize they're the pale foil comparison to me, basically, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think everybody has that in them, but some people identify a little bit more with the will itself, versus others
Right,
might relate more with the herd type of like, oh, I need this identity, this group to
right.
really
Kind of
explain
like the
myself.
externalized needing
Yeah,
of the group,
yeah. Anything else to share for aphorism 13? It's a small one, but it's a lot to think about there as well. Otherwise, we'll go on to aphorism 14. Um,
Well, I have one point to make. In my conception, the will to power is less about the concepts in which you are engaging or
mhm.
like the metaphysical ideas, but instead the materialness of it. So you don't want to make the best film to make the best film for the experience or the higher good of having the best film, but you want the best film to have the best physical results in your life. You want to get basically you want to get the best mate
right. It's
as
not
a
like an
result.
ideal you're going for. You're going for just producing the highest quantum of power or strength that you can with your actions.
Yeah, exactly. And
But another way that I like to see the will to power is like we have this tyranny of drives within us, right? And they're all competing for that top authority. Oh, I got to take a poop. Oh, I want to fuck, or oh, I want to eat, or oh, I want to create, or you know what I mean? And it's like all of the like all of those contrasting drives that we have within us build its own ranking and its own pathos of distance. Like, oh, these are the drives that are me and that are going to differentiate me. And these are the lower drives that barely even get noticed by me. You know, they get subsumed into my higher drives. And it's that tyranny of the drives at the top that's really detailing the will to power and that whole rank ordering of all of your contrasting drives. So the more contrasting drives you have within yourself, the more will to power you're going to have to expend. And Nietzsche details this somewhere in his philosophy. I can't remember exactly where, but he talks about like, oh, I have maintained the most that's why he contradicts himself so much, quote unquote contradicts. But you see what I'm saying? It's like these contrasting drives, but it's also like, oh, like that's why he's all about chastity because it fuels the sensualism for art. You know what I mean? So
So
it's like,
I have a couple of follow-up questions, if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
So one interesting thing that you kind of mentioned is also like, even though this is what's happening externally, right? You competing with other artists, for example, is the same thing that's happening inside. You competing with the different, like your
Oh, okay, yeah,
there's a hierarchy
I
of
like
drive,
that, right? Yeah,
right?
it's like you're
It's
almost
like,
competing against, like maybe you see a certain drive in another artist that you consider low on your ranking.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And you're like,
yeah,
man, fuck that shit. I'll show this motherfucker up with my. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
It's
Exactly.
almost like a knife sharpening another knife too. Even if their drive is very similar to yours, your drive
Right,
that's
metal on
is
metal, it's just right there.
yeah,
You know.
exactly. And another thing is, how would you consider what will to power is? Right? Is this the like whichever is the strongest drive gets to be
Well, as
the will
Nietzsche
to
says,
power? Yeah.
soon enough, I think one of them is coming up to where he talks about every drive has attempted to practice mastery at some point or another. So it's like, the drives constantly shift a little bit up at the top. It's like, okay, now I'm doing art, but now I want to go, instead of doing art, oh, I got to
I'm
go
gonna
do
go.
this other, it's just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
whatever has your attention at the time, whatever passion or whatever. I mean, most of the time it's going to be our passions, you know what I mean? But
Mm.
sometimes it's like actual bodily functions that take priority too.
But they're all different manifestations of will to power, and will to power is whichever is this whole organization of the hierarchy of drives
Right, right. And
that
you'll
itself.
see in that one aphorism where he says that every, you know, every one of these desires is an aspect of the will to power trying to just push itself on itself basically and overcome, and you know what I mean? It's just that continual struggle for the top attention of your
Yeah.
daily activity, your actions basically.
And even though you might identify at times with X or Y or Z, that they're all in a way you, and and they're all in a way different aspects of the will to power. Not necessarily one more than the other. Depends on the hierarchy, which one gets to be the represented in your life the most. Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah,
I
well,
just wanted to make. Oh, sorry.
I think it's about like, as the name implies, it is the power is the end goal. So it's not about the desire, but it's about the manifestation of power. So whatever is in the current ranking of power needs or potentials of power would probably be the better way to put it. That is that is this what takes precedence over the others, in
I'm
my
also
estimation.
going over, I guess what I'm going off of is there's also a later aphorism in BGE where it's like, suppose all that is real is that of your dreams and desires. And I'm also using the whole concept from Deleuze that, you know, every production within yourself is a production of desire at its most basic level. You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm not saying like in the end, you know what I mean? Like, it starts off as this longing or yearning to do whatever, you know what I mean? It's so I get what you're saying. Like, the end result is this power thing, but I was just saying from the beginning result, like, oh, it's
a desire.
Yeah, it just stems from this desire to do. So you see what I'm saying? Rather than the end result. I'm coming.
Well, the desire is that which we can experience, but it is the concept of power which takes the cake for the whole concept.
I see what you're saying now. It's like the desire is that which we experience, and that's like the instinct, but it's like it's the feeling of power, which is why we're doing it, is what you're saying. Like, we get the desire from the feeling of power that comes from it.
Yeah, the feeling of power is a fulfillment in a sense, temporary as it might.
Like he says in Antichrist,
overcoming,
right? Like he says in Antichrist too. Like, what is strength, or what is happiness? The ability to overcome weakness, or whatever. You know what I mean? Some shit like that.
Until the end, the goal gets moved again further away.
Exactly.
And it continues.
I also want to stress it in the manner that I have. Because I think our desires are often unconscious, so it is not right to focus the concept on the desire, but instead on the end goal, which we can experience and which we do desire, but it's not a conscious desire. So I think it's more helpful to focus on the thing that we can experience and that is the telos of our desire in the end.
Well, I guess that's kind of trying to make a. That's kind of that's making like a ideal of your power or something in my mind, other than like just like letting it discharge itself naturally. You see what I'm saying? Like, because like Nietzsche, like you'll see in Twilight of Idol, Nietzsche talks about confusing the end with the beginning result. You see what I'm saying? And to me, I kind of feel like you're doing that. And he talks about that with reason and philosophy. We often confuse the end result for the beginning.
It's a post hoc rationalization of like, I did it for the end result, but it's more because of the longing.
Exactly. Like, it started off as a desire, and that's why Nietzsche doesn't believe in free or unfree wills. It's about the strong and weak will, you see. So it's if your desire is strong enough to do it in the first place. Otherwise, if it's, you know what I mean? Like, you could have all the desire to do it in the world even too, but sometimes you're right. It's like you don't have enough power to even do it. So that's when Nietzsche starts getting into the whole idea of like the slave morality, and when you can't actively, overcome, or you can't actually have the triumphant affirmation of your own demands in life. So, I mean, I guess there's something to that, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I just have to sit down and think about what you're saying more and ruminate on it. But as for me, I'm just saying I'm starting from the beginning of where it starts at, for the reason of the error of, considering the last for the beginning that Nietzsche discusses in Twilight. And
wait, so
I would have to, if I may respond quickly. I would have to read that passage that you're talking about and the work in itself. The reason why I gave my concept of it is that power is, to me, the materially observable, while the desire is something fleeting and something where
but see,
we are in this.
Like, see, so aesthetic Socratism, like, basically, it denies our instincts, that unconscious desires. Like I'll pull up another aphorism in the book, and I'll post it in book discussions. I'm pretty sure it's in Twilight, but it's talking about almost this exact same thing that we're talking about right now. I'm sorry, what did you just say again?
Well, I'm just going to repeat my point that
Yes,
power
sorry.
is to me the material aspect of it and the material end goal, while the desire is something fleeting that is happening in our minds, and it is something that can trump over each other, and once or all yeah, and once we take it as our fixed point, as our fixation, the desire, then we're gonna be flattering in the wind, and then we're not gonna attain the will to power, or are not gonna fulfill the will to power.
So you should be able
Because
to channel that desire, is what you're saying, towards also fulfilling and overcoming the obstacle, rather than just having the potential of being wishy-washy of like, oh, I want to do this in theory, but not quite having um,
yes,
the steps planned
yes,
out.
Yeah, that's what
correct.
I was trying to say there. I think Dirk or Stark or
Yeah, you
kind
could
of
call me Stark. That's
yeah,
fine.
sorry. Yeah, I think Starker
Yeah, yeah,
and I know Dur is just actually Dare. You're Dare Stark. Yeah, I got you.
yeah. They're Stark or
Yeah, we're there.
Stark.
Stark will. Yeah. I'm just being therapy right now.
um, yeah,
Because
that's
also Wille is also longing, wanting. That is the desire translated. So,
interesting. So it might be something that's lost in the English version translation of will. Like will to power is more almost um, kind of referring to the end result of like, oh, this is the you know,
Oh, right, like the Wild der Macht or whatever. Like it has a different German thing rather than just. It has a slightly different aspect in the German meaning rather than in the English
not
meaning.
really.
Well,
I
no.
realized that
yeah.
will is an English word. So I'm just paraphrasing. So it
But
is correctly translated with the word will.
but that is interesting how like if I guess the concept of will to power is a little bit more tied to the end result of, because it's more tied to the overcoming itself. But there is also, like you said, in the origin itself is as a desire. That's the egg, basically, that it grows, and then you feel the need to express
Right,
yourself
because I
and
mean,
overcome.
obviously the desire isn't going to be the discharge of the will to
Yeah,
power. You see what
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. But it's a
And
tight
I
relation.
think he was talking about the discharging of the will to power versus the
Yes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was talking about the origin. So
Got it. Got
yeah,
it. Got it.
my fault.
And what do you think is the kind of related note? What do you think leads to this like buildup of energy, right? This need, this potential, this desire. Is it depends on the
That
instinct? I mean,
concept of a Nui. Have you ever heard of a Nui?
no, no.
I
I
mean,
mean, if you would share it, I would love it.
it's basically that whole like what you're just talking about right there. It's the concept of you being bored to the point where you build up this like this dissatisfaction in you until
Yeah.
you're urged into action. That's what a
Mm.
Nui is. And Nietzsche talks about it a couple times. I can pull up a couple of his
Yeah,
things,
I
but
would.
he
Yeah, I would love to.
he says like women and like nihilists are like they don't experience a Nui as much as men do for some
Interesting.
reason. Yeah. So
Yeah, I would love to see that aphorism
sure.
as well. But I guess it goes into the concept of like man always wishes for utopia. Mankind in general wishes for utopia, but we don't ever want that, because the first thing that we do with the really peaceful, really like perfect world is how do we kill our boredom by doing something else chaotic, break out of this and do something else. Like we don't want
Wait, I have a
just
question actually
yeah,
for
we don't
Vic.
want just
Um,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go. I was gonna say, is what you're talking about with Anui? is that kind of like the meme of like guys liking the movie Fight Club or liking zombie apocalypse scenarios where it's kind of like, oh, I can finally be a man now. Do they feel pressured or like closed in by society and safety?
I don't
think it's
think
an
exactly, but there is something to that you're talking about.
Like a
It's
male
not exactly a
like a male
Dewey, but
boredness in safety.
yeah, I mean, see, that's one of those new things with societies nowadays. That's why we get so addicted to things like video games, because that's the only place where we can actually like kind of, experience some of those crazy things that humans would normally do, you know what I mean? Like back in the past, you know what I mean? So it's just like we
I don't
find
know
it.
if I
Go
don't
on.
know if you're all kind of reading into it too much, because this just sounds to me like he's copying Schopenhauer, like talking about the same boredom that Schopenhauer talks about when he talks about the pendulum of boredom and suffering.
Well, I mean, let me pull up the quotes about Anui or whatever. I'll find
But
them.
the only point I would say, Kat, here is that isn't the goal here to like this causes you to want to discharge your energy, right? You don't want to. You're not satisfied from where you are, even though you have everything in life. Everything is peaceful and grand. You're just like, oh, this still isn't what I want. It's almost like that person who's longing to be a millionaire and getting everything and then realizing, hey, I want more, because that never really ends of that desire, that longing, and not just it can sometimes stem from boredom, and might be the case where you're just like
391 half.
which book?
Human all too human, Anui. Many people, especially women, never feel Anui because they have never learnt to work properly.
Interesting. I'll have to read more into it.
Wait, I didn't. How do you spell it?
ENNUI. 391 and human all too human.
I'm gonna just put it.
Okay.
So
we're
I would
all
disagree.
pronouncing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe Anway, or maybe my pronunciation was shit on that. Sorry guys.
It's apparently like Unvi or something.
Yeah, Anve. Yeah, I just saw it for the first time on the pronunciation. So yeah,
It's
my fault.
So I would disagree on the will arising from boredom. I would again say that the will arises from the end.
Oh no, I wasn't saying the will does. I was just saying like
the desire.
The desire.
The desire. Well, the desire and the will is the same thing in my eyes.
Yeah, it's related. Yeah,
and
yeah.
So, because I think it just arises as like literally a physical phenomenon in our brains, basically. It's just because we have the idea to dominate, the idea to procreate, and the pleasure derived from it. That is why it's happening. So it's not because life is so boring and so suffering, but because it is beautiful, and because we have the potential to experience that beauty. It's not because we are running away from boredom. That's why I find that parallel to Schopenhauer very interesting, because Schopenhauer, as Nietzsche got to describe him, is somewhat opposed to life.
I guess that's a great point, which is that it's not out of boredom that you're necessarily doing it, but it's more because you want more, right? You want to capture something more beautiful,
Yeah, exactly.
No, but
yes, exactly. And you have the drive in you. I mean, it's also you also have the drive to commit atrocities. That's also something.
But
the drive to be cruel. That's also to experience the power and to trump over your enemy.
Go ahead, Kat.
The Schopenhauerian sense of boredom isn't like a sort of negative boredom, like just feeling bored. It's like kind of what all of you are describing, but something more fundamental. It's specifically what leads to people never being satisfied. Because if that part of the pendulum didn't exist, then the entire motion between like not being satisfied and then experiencing suffering wouldn't exist. We would just be fulfilled.
I mean, that's great and all, but aren't we Nietzscheans? Don't we fucking hate Schopenhauer?
I'll be more than happy to post all the frickin' aphorisms on it. So.
Go ahead.
You know what I mean?
I'll
be doing that. So I'll post that. You guys can
all the
have
relevant stuff.
And you know what I mean? So
the reason I'm bringing this up is just because, like, we need to go over some of the metaphysical similarities that exist between Nietzsche and Schopenhauer to understand Nietzsche, because what he does is he like flips Schopenhauer on his head. Well, he adds a lot more to it as well, but like that's where he starts from. So it's not like he is the complete antithesis of Schopenhauer in the sense that they have absolutely nothing in common. They have like some core ideas.
They have the inversion in common, and especially on this regards of concept of the quality of life and the matter of life, and how what drives us. Well, Schopenhauer, in my estimation, was just like trying to avoid suffering. Nietzsche was trying to achieve greatness. So that's why.
No, but the foundation isn't like the difference here. It's the value judgment that they assign to the foundation. Like what you said is just that Schopenhauer sees this sort of painful aspect of life and thinks, this sucks, I want to get out of here. Nietzsche sees the same thing that Schopenhauer saw, but then just says that, this is good. Well, not completely that. It depends what more Nietzsche we're talking about, but at least late Nietzsche thought like that.
Yeah.
Right, he took up the idea of drives from Schopenhauer, right?
Yeah.
So Schopenhauer is a fundamental thinker in that regard.
Yeah, drives, and then like our basic psychology of existing in a perpetual state of needing more and never like reaching a state of like ataraxia, I guess. Of like feeling calm and fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. All right. Be good with that. We'll go on to aphorism 14. If you guys are following along. He talks about how like how it's just like 5 or 6 minds in physics kind of put together the representation of the world, but it's also just an interpretation and not a world explanation, and which is really interesting because you would think like, oh, it's materialism and the cause and effect and everything, so this has to be the the real thing, but there itself is also it's just an interpretation, a part of the I guess an explanation for how the world works, but it's not quite the truth, because you can't. It's all interpretations. And in the bottom he says, where man cannot find anything to see or grasp, he has no further business. This is sadly how most scientists think, and most the average person thinks. It's like, oh, if he can't quite grasp it and play with it and look at it from different point of views, that that's the most objective, and if he can't do that, then there is no point meddling with those things.
Aesthetic Socratism.
Yeah, which is very interesting, because I think the world is slowly starting to recognize, and it might take a long time, that one of the most important parts is the psychological perspective of things, like how you view things, your interpretations. Those things are like, there's a lot to go into there.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff that Nietzsche attacked in language really spurred like the whole linguistic movement in philosophy, because a lot of them are like, trying to put the like, hey, language is still useful, like they're trying to secure language as not being something detrimental to science. You know what I mean? So they're trying to like Nietzsche's assault on language. I don't know. Like you got Wittgenstein and Quine, they're all influenced heavily by Nietzsche, you know what I mean? And they're like two of the biggest linguists that I can think of right now. But anyways, sorry.
Yeah, I think it needs to kind of go into those questions, and we kind of default and almost forget and fall into materialism, in the modern world, being like, oh, if it's not things and stuff, then we don't understand any further, or like it's pointless. Like psychology is still considered one of the weakest topics, or like nobody cares about it because it's all subjective, and if you can't hold it in your hand, then what the hell is the point arguing about it? But yeah, like the work of Nietzsche leading to linguists changing the perspective on that. I hope it keeps catching fire and go in that direction, because it's not what you possess that is the most value. It's man is the measurer in a way. We give it value. So the psychology behind it is everything really. Your interpretation, your way of looking at things, and your instincts about it, and all these other aspects. Anything else to add about aphorism 14? Okay, otherwise we'll go into 15. See what I wrote. So he talks about how our sense organs aren't, let me see, what did he say? Are not the causes. What do you guys think about it? Because he's saying, wait, let me highlight it. Let's see, the external world. Others even say that the external world is a work of our organs, but then our body, as a part of this external world, would be a word for our organs. So kind of circular logic, but then our organs themselves would be the work of organs.
Yeah, it's like
So
you
it
said,
becomes,
reduction to absurdity.
yeah.
Because it's like, oh, the external world would be the work of our internal world. Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
So how do you guys read this in terms of when Nietzsche also mentions a lot about, you are your physiology, you are your gut or whatnot, right? It all starts in your gut, or your diet and all the stuff. The way Nietzsche speaks of it, how do you connect this and don't consider it as a contradiction, or is he making you just question the validity of his own arguments regarding that? Well, how do you guys read this? Any takes?
I mean, there's like the your stomach and your brain are very tightly connected, more than people think, I think. And taking care of your body and your digestive system is a very important part of a good mental health. I think that's something he believed in, maybe like something in a very literal sense of what he's saying. That's what I take from it.
It just sounds to me like it's restating something that people have already said, which is just that solipsism is bullshit, which isn't that interesting to me. What would be more interesting is what to him is the alternative to, like, solipsism, because I've heard some people talk about him as if he is, like, nearly solipsistic in his understanding of truth. And if you have, like, because, like, on the other hand, here he's obviously like implying that we need to assume an external reality, which just sounds annoyingly Marxist to me,
Yeah.
and I feel like isn't something he would like.
Yeah.
But
The only way I really think he adheres with external and internal is when it comes to values. You know, it's like if you value something externally, you become an impoverished mentality compared to the person who um values something internally. And he discusses this in GOM 10. But as far as like the whole internal external world, that's like a metaphysical distinction, you know what I mean? So, and what he's saying here with the whole Kauzasui thing, because he always thinks Kauzasui is bullshit, which is that whole thing where it's like I am the cause of myself, basically. That's Kauzasui. And that's what he's going in with this, like the organ is, or the organs are the cause of our organs. That's Kauzasui, because the organs create themselves like out of nowhere. But you know, like no. Like
mm,
we actually have reproduction. But you know, he says if the conception of Kauzasui is fundamentally absurd, then this too is also absurd because the organs are the work of our organs. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but so this is
yeah, but
this. Yeah, go ahead, Kat.
this, I mean, I haven't read this in a while, but like, mm, it like does seem to imply that there is like a world external to us which affect our judgments instead of our judgments affecting the external world, which I guess places him in a more materialist camp, which I guess at like the same time means that there's some kind of gap between like his metaphysics and his epistemology on the other hand,
Hmm.
which I guess isn't all that weird.
Well, like metaphysics, the origin of metaphysics is in the unity of something, right? So it's like, take for example, it's like a unifying force of like, oh, this thing is, you know what I mean? It's like this is this, like this is, these are all the properties that belong to this, basically.
Mm,
Just skip that. Sorry, I didn't tie that in very well. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we can always continue it in the
And the chat.
chat as
Yeah.
well. Yes, exactly. All right. So now we'll go on to 16, and let's see. 16 goes about. Yeah, in this, Nietzsche claims that immediate certainty is a contradiction. That the present is somehow devoid of false. The idea that the present is devoid of falsifications, and he, yeah, he goes into a lot here, which is really good to read. Where he says that you make a lot of assumptions about like what I is, as he famously talks about how the whole I in Rene Descartes is I think therefore I am, and that there is something. You're assuming that there is something that does the thinking, and that thinking is done by being a thought as a cause, and then that the ego exists, and that we also assume what thinking is, which are all really great questions, like great assumptions that pointing at the assumptions that we make with the statement like that. I think therefore I am, of like we understand, we assume a lot of things by making a statement like that are, and we assume that that statement is obviously true when it's filled with falsifications. um, and yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, it's also that whole part with like just the psychology of grammar and language anyways, you know, it's like it forces the whole subject and verb, or subject and predicate agreement, which, I mean, it comes into 17 right after 16, but you know what I mean? Like 17 basically explains 16 in a way,
Okay.
or maybe 16 works into 17 in a way, but it's like, you know, let me find I wrote something earlier on this. Let me find it.
So it's like lightning flashes is bullshit. There's
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
the discharge of energy and the light that goes like the part of that. There's no actual lightning doing anything.
Yeah, but he goes a lot into it because, like, for example, when he says, like, what do you think is happening when you say that I think? How do you know that you're actually thinking? What is thinking, right? Well, how are you separating it from just willing or a feeling, right? You're just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking," but what is thinking, right? Like you're just
Yeah,
assuming you
Nietzsche doesn't
understand.
think, or when Nietzsche says thinking is just an action that happens, and he
Yeah,
discusses this in Twilight as well.
it's just
Yeah, it's
more
you're
aphorisms
not
for you.
doing that thinking yourself. You're not a doer of the thinking. It's just
Exactly.
something that happens with your drives and all that. It's just that our language, we the way we see ourselves and express ourselves through language, we see ourselves as a subject, the thing in itself, and then
Mm,
we posit. You see what I'm saying? It's like
yeah,
uh, every
I am the cause.
every word is a defined unity. Basically, it's like
Mm, mm,
light, or
mm,
mild, or nature. Like, what is nature really? Like, nature is a whole shitload of things, but it's this metaphysical idea too. But it's this unifying thing of all these experiences that we have in nature. Like, you know, if I can think of all this shit you can experience out in nature, like, there's
I
a
mean,
lot of
you
things
yourself.
unified. Yeah, and it's unified in this one word, nature, and it's like,
Yeah.
but that's what
So,
the thing, the subject is. It's like us unified into this thinking, doing actor
Mm.
that
so then
aims at things.
would consciousness also be a unifying thing that takes in like thinking and feeling and all of that as well, or is there like a difference between consciousness and thinking? Just curious about
No,
your insight
that's
on
a good question. I'd have to ruminate on that because that actually gets pretty deep.
that.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would think what I mean the
ask the
way you
question
define
again.
it.
Sorry, I gotta.
So is like consciousness a unifying thing where it takes in
Right,
thinking
it's
and
not. It's
feeling and all these?
Yeah, I would say
you know.
thinking is a type of, but like part of being conscious, or because it's a feeling of you recognizing that you're having a thought or you're having this desire, right? That's a conscious.
Hmm.
Well, I would say
Well, I
yes
think
to you because, like, as Nietzsche says, willing is this multiplicity of sensations, and consciousness comes from a certain type of willing. I'm assuming in some
I
way.
think we hit a wall here. It's an important question to ask, but I think the interesting part about philosophy is we can ask certain questions that are very important that we cannot answer ourselves in our own lifetime, but give on to the next generation to explore later on as technology and awareness increases. So consciousness and it's like what it is in relation to thinking and these drives, I think cannot be deduced yet.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, from Nietzsche's perspective at his date and time, this is just what he's saying about consciousness, as he can detail it himself, more or less, rather than actually stating some true fact about. You know what I mean? It's just his version of how he's expressing consciousness, more or less.
The other thing I would say is that I wouldn't necessarily say that, oh, we don't have the tools to understand consciousness now, and so we should give it time. That's like saying that we are evolving towards a better interpretation of ourselves. It's like there is no, it's just another interpretation, right? So you should continuously try to figure out things and do things. Like Nietzsche wrote this, he could have just been like, oh, I don't need to dig into the psychology of mankind. It will be done in the future. If anything, it seems like we're going backwards, like less people understand to the extent that Nietzsche understood these concepts, because we haven't dug into these things. And even Freud said that, right? Freud said that Nietzsche has more depth into himself than anybody else that he knows. So
The way I
it's
see it
not
is kind of like
necessary. It's not necessary to say that, like, oh, we shouldn't, like, this is a future thing to worry about, when that's kind of assuming that
we can we
some
can
better
explore it for sure, but I
interpretation.
don't think we can like find the absolute answer. We can
Yeah,
explore it
it's kind of
meaningfully.
like the Big Bang, we can explore it up to an extent, but I think there's still going to be
Yeah,
some
I
obvious things in the future that we're going to find out about consciousness. We haven't.
I see it kind of like alchemy. Alchemy is not like junk or bunk. It was a necessary step as a precursor to chemistry, right? Like science and a lot of other endeavors have like an infancy rather, that is built upon into adolescence as time goes on and as the environment and mankind changes. And I
Yeah,
think
and
this is one of those ideas that can like
this is one of the
gain
points Nietzsche
complexity as we
made.
figure it out more.
Sorry.
I don't fully agree, because that's again going with this idea of one interpretation in the future is going to be better, and we should just not look to think about this more, just because it will be better interpreted in the future. It's like we don't know that
No,
one,
I agree
and
with you in that too. Like
and we
we can
should,
talk about
and
it all we can now. You know what I mean? For sure.
yeah, yeah. And that's what Nietzsche is doing here, right? He's saying,
Absolutely.
oh, what is thinking, what is willing, what is feeling, how are you differentiating it? We should be like, this is like telling him, hey, why are you talking about this? 100 years from now we'll have it all figured out. Well, 100 years from him we aren't any better at it, right? So we
Right.
shouldn't just
Exactly. So.
assume that it will be better, and that he should not have done this. That doesn't, only
Right.
by
No,
doing
I get
does it
what you're
work.
saying, because that's like assuming that we won't, or assuming that we won't have anything better until the future assumes that whole like the dragon thing, the dragon of thou shalt, like, oh, just shut the
Yeah,
fuck up, sit
yeah,
down,
yeah,
give up.
exactly.
Instead of going after what the lion wills, you're gonna listen to thou shalt, the dragon.
I'm not saying he shouldn't explore it. I'm just saying we can
No,
explore it as
you're
much as
right.
we
You're
want,
right.
and we should. We should explore it. But I think we must be humbled a little bit to the idea that like we may have to pass what we find to the next generation for pondering, and they can pass that next generation, next generation, next generation.
And I agree
Yeah,
with
but
that
I
too.
don't
And
believe
even
in the
Nietzsche does, because in Ecce Homo, he says, maybe there are some people that can continue my work. It's like, who knows what he's talking about in that kind of continuance, but it's like,
That's what I'm kind of
just
saying.
because
Like,
just because
yeah,
Nietzsche talks about it here doesn't mean it's the end all be all of what he wants. You know what I mean? There's still
yeah, but
some continuance in his work.
he
Absolutely,
still says to
absolutely.
explore it, right? He doesn't say, pass the buck to the future. He says,
No,
this is
you're
what
right.
I'm
I think
doing.
maybe we just got trick fucked by language in itself. Like, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like sometimes we express things poorly. I've been doing that here already, like with Cat and Graham or
It's fine.
and like maybe they're even right, like maybe boredom wasn't the right word to use, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's like when you have your passions, you're not bored. You see what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Because when you're in your passions, it's not like you're like, oh man, fucking life's boring as shit, Because it's like if you're bored, then it's like, bro, you don't really have any passions. So you see what I'm saying? So I get where they're coming from. So I'll give them that. You know what I mean? Like
It's
we sometimes we just explain things poorly, like I do, and with the words. But Ozzy obviously means like, hey man, in the future you never know. And I can kind of agree with that, just because, but we should do our due diligence to
yeah,
discuss
because
it
I
now,
feel like
basically.
oftentimes, like if we talk to like an average person, right? They'll say like, oh, why even bother with philosophy? We'll have it all figured out in the future. Don't worry about philosophy. Worry about now. Live in the moment. Do your things.
Right,
What you
right.
say. They could completely get rid of an entire field by that same argument, right? By saying,
For sure. I mean,
don't
it's like,
waste your
oh,
time with it.
why are we doing this when we got automated?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but Nietzsche also is kind of related somewhat to this point. Is also, back in the day, I guess people would come up with beliefs and things that weren't really like really, they didn't really fight it and test it and all this other stuff. They would just say that It's a sort of intuitive perception. And that I think and know that this at least is true. Actual, like they used to almost be like, "Oh, my instinct says so. I feel this is true," uh, rather than testing it out. And Nietzsche wants against that kind of thing, and that is perhaps the other point. Is like back in the day, people would have had to do that more because they didn't have, good
We
ways
didn't
of
have the
thinking.
language and all this stuff that, like,
Yeah.
language is as Nietzsche says in Twilight, language is a product of reason, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's like language is a product of metaphysics and reason, and it basically differentiated us from things like nature and like man and woman and all these other things and stuff. You know what I mean? It started
Mhm.
giving us all these different ways to develop our conscious thinking about things. Like, oh, like at first it was very base, some words were like, instead of a word, it was just you'd say something, it was an utterance, and it meant like, oh, I'm going to take the cows down to the lake or some shit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And the like update, I read both of the versions, like the previous one and this one, and I think I get it now. It's basically, to me, just making like a post-Kantian claim in the sense of going further than Kant himself in the sort of agnostic attitude towards things in themselves. Like I actually read like a secondary material on this like topic,
Mm.
and it seems that basically he thinks that even assigning the word thing in itself to something is already too much. It's going away from the agnostic position that we're actually in, and it's a metaphysical act in itself to use language to describe something we don't know.
Mm.
Right. And I mean, it's a metaphysical thing in itself because it's like, hey, the thing in itself is you're unifying all these drives into the subject, the thing, it, I.
Mm.
No,
But
but even if you talk about drives, like it's the same thing. Whenever you try to get to the bottom of anything, you end up eventually with this naked object, which you don't know, but then you pretend to know by assigning something, like some truth value to it,
Yeah.
through labeling it.
We get to that in 17 actually, where
we'll
he
go
talks
straight
he
into
talks
that.
about reducing the it from the body like to the I, It's like, oh, we changed the body to I because we didn't know what else to, you know what I mean? It's like, oh,
Mm.
we assume the body is the I because that's, when
You know,
he has another aphorism on naming things somewhere
you
too.
know, I'll have to pull this up, but a while ago I watched a TED talk on like how back in the day when they used to write, they wouldn't use I as much to mention their ideas, and then I became more of a common term to be used um, as we evolved, which is just in the linguistic sense itself of like I started appearing more often.
Right? It would be more like in the feeling of this or that, blah blah blah. It
Yeah,
would be describing something rather than, oh, when I was doing this, I
yeah,
discovered. You know what I mean?
which is interesting how we as a species became more egotistical, egocentric, I guess, of referring to ourselves that I am doing this or I'm making this happen. Um,
I am
and you
the
can see
actor.
that,
I am the aimer. I
yes,
am the
and you can
doer.
see it in language how it has evolved to show just looking at the occurrences of I appearing, which is really cool. Um, yeah, it's the same thing. It says that I is the condition of the predicate think. It thinks, but it precisely is the famous old ego. Um, Yeah, thinking is an activity. Every activity requires an agent. Therefore, I is the agent. It's not it. And then he goes into, you know, there's an operating power, that lump of matter which resides and out of which it operates, the atom. And then goes further to say, more rigorous minds, however, learned at last to get along without this earth residuum, and perhaps one day we shall custom ourselves, including logicians, to get along without the little it. And so this is would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. So he's saying that, okay, there's no I, it's the like, then refers to how people have started thinking of it as it's a lump of matter that, our physiology or whatnot that operates it, or like of the atom. Yeah.
Well, as he says, there's no immediate certainty to the whole I think. He
Yeah.
says, you know, namely that a thought comes when it wishes and not when I wish. So that is a falsification of the facts of the case, that to say the subject I is the condition of the predicate think. It's a falsification to say I think, because you're just asserting that. It's not an immediate certainty.
But it does seem like he goes here even further and says that there is no it either.
Yeah. So where do you guys take that?
Yeah,
Like, how do you?
it is just like another portion of the grammatical subject. It's like, oh, the body, it it is a unifying thing for it, that
Physiology, your
unit.
desire, the
Yeah, for
desiring thing.
yeah, sure, like or even a cup, a rock. It, like,
But the interesting thing is, like, if you look at yourself and you remove the I and consider that as part of the ego, and then you're like, okay, what makes these decisions? And that's the matter, your physiology. And he's saying here that, you know rigorous minds have also figured how to get rid of that. It's almost like going back to the idea of you can't separate the doer from the action. How there is no it either.
yeah, like I could pull up another thing from Twilight. He says, like, there's no aiming to your actions and stuff. You know what I mean? It's just, you just do it, not aiming. Or actually, that's from Ecce Homo.
So
Why
he
I'm so
doesn't mean in almost like Heraclitus said, how it just flows, it just happens, things just keep happening, rather than it doing something, like a cause tied to it, or a doer of some sort tied to it that is causing these things to happen. That's how I see it. I don't know what you guys think.
I'm just trying to find this aphorism real quick. It gets into it really good. Let me see.
I feel like the part where I find challenging is that, even though this idea of like separating doer from the action is maybe nonsense, because there is no separating either of those, but at the same time, you know how, like, your thoughts can persuade you to take one action versus the other, right? So what do you guys think that is then? Like, if there is no separation between doer and action, then I guess that's a competition of the different drives in yourself, and you're just giving it the space for it to, like, battle it out in your conscious mind of which one makes the most sense, rationalizing it. Does that make sense? We can always come back to it. I know it's what do you think, Vicaris? We'll come back to it. You can keep sharing, find the aphorism. All right. I guess since no one saying anything. We'll go on to 18. All right. What did I say about 18? Okay. This is kind of funny, even though it's a small aphorism. I feel like Nietzsche has mentioned this so many times, and yet it
Sorry, where are we
is
again?
aphorism 18.
Okay.
Nietzsche has spoken about this so many times, but even in Nietzsche subreddits, like just today, I see the same point being argued back and forth in every philosophy, I guess, space.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
18 is great because it's just like so ironic, you know?
because it's like 100 times refuted theory of free will,
Yeah,
and yet
exactly.
people keep arguing that. Like he mentioned it clearly, like 100 years ago, and repeatedly mentioned it through his writing, and people are still like, nope. Again and again, someone comes along who feels he's strong enough to refute it, and it just keeps going on. Yeah, it just keeps. So
Keeps
yeah,
not being free.
yeah, yeah, and we just keep loving this argument of determinism versus free will, when he's just like, this is a dumb conversation to have, and he said that 100 years ago, and we still continue to this day. How it's and his way would be to say that it's more about strong and weak wills rather than free and unfree or deterministic world. But yeah. Now let's go to aphorism 19.
This
Okay.
is like the whole unifying aspect of the will.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Another interesting thing that he mentioned. Yeah, when a man, let me scroll that. A man who wills commands something within himself that renders obedience, or that he believes renders obedience. So it's lovely how, like, when you set out to do something and you're like, I'm going to do this, and you act on it, there is both a commander in you and an obeyer in you,
Yes,
which
yes.
is beautiful, really, like to even state it so perfectly. But you are both. So, and when you get that feeling of power, that's like one will really, like being like, I was able to do this chore or this activity, and you're really celebrating your ability to command these other wills under you to be motivated, quote unquote, to do so.
Ergen
Um,
Croxley actually had a really good discussion with Gower Singh on, in the book discussion channel about how
mm,
every act of will has at least two wills in it.
yeah,
So if anybody wants to read up on that,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's actually not too far up. But
yeah. I will scroll up and
disregard
read
all
it.
my bullshit with saying or whatever because it's just me being stupid. But
Yeah, I mean that you share
I know.
different
Still,
perspectives.
I was just in my blah
Yeah,
at the
but
moment. You know what I mean? Like,
it's really cool. He says that I'm free. He must obey. This consciousness is inherent in every will, which is saying I'm free, which is the will speaking, or the highest drive speaking, and he must obey is these underwills or these
yes, and that's
other
what I was talking
lower.
about with the will to power. Is like, hey, I'm here. This is my time. I'm practicing mastery up here. Y'all gonna obey. This is the rank order and the pass those of distance. I'm king right now, bitch. Like, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yeah. And like we talked, it's the internal as well as external.
yes, sir.
Um, like yeah, this is the same thing that
We'll
happens.
also see in like 35 that will can only act upon will, and this is one of Nietzsche's big theses is like
Mm, mm.
the whole psychic world. Like, there's a will and a rock even. You know what I mean? or a
Mhm.
rose with thorns. That thorn, like, Erg describes it perfectly with the rose and the thorns, because it's like, oh, the thorn on the rose is actually the plant's will to fucking keep you the fuck away from it. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, back the fuck off. I
Mm,
got thorns, and it's sure it's not like a thinking thorn that can just like prehensile and like grab you. You know what I mean? But it's
mhm,
it's
mhm.
there. There's a reason for it. The plant willed it into existence to protect itself.
Another cool thing is that Nietzsche almost uh, kind of improves on Rene Descartes' "I think, therefore am" by saying, "Okay, what can we really know about the world?" And um, it's not quite Nietzsche's idea because he references Schopenhauer, but he says Schopenhauer has given us to understand that the will alone is really known to us, absolutely and completely known without subtraction or addition. There's the only thing we can really be certain, in a sense, is that the will exists, like something
Right,
will,
right.
something, and
Something wills, yes.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we got to be careful with the whole something wills, because that's
Oh
also
yeah, that's also putting an
that's the whole,
agent to
yeah,
it.
that's putting
There's
the
willing.
yeah,
That's it,
yeah, it's
right?
willing. That's it. When we say something wills, we just commit the whole fucking thing with 17 and 16.
It's so easy to do, right? It's easy to
Exactly,
fall
because we're
into these.
so fucking used to it, and we're so conditioned in our
Yes.
language and the psychology of our own fucking grammar. It's just like bam, and that's why we mistake, or that's why we come up with these shitty sentences just on a fly. We're pulling these words like unless we're actually practiced at articulating ourselves exceptionally well, like Nietzsche or even Griffinhai. That
Mm.
motherfucker is like the best person at articulating himself I've ever known. So,
Yeah, it's
and I've
really
known him for like a decade, you know what I mean? We've been
good.
going at Nietzsche back and forth forever, and fucking like the power of articulation, sweet. Anyways, that's way off topic, but whatever.
And here he even breaks down the willing a little bit here, where he goes into, yeah, see, let us say that in all willing there is first a plurality of sensations, namely the sensation of the state away from which, and the sensation of the state towards which, the sensation of from and towards themselves. So yeah, so it's, if you break down the willing even more, it's more like the desire is like, oh, going towards something or moving away from something, whether it's towards something pleasurable or towards something that is considered some necessity or whatnot, right? Your basic instincts.
Yeah, and
um
like I said, it's always the whole it's like it's a multiplicity of things. And down here we get to the whole point where it's like it's an emotion, it's thinking, and then we have the sensations, we have the emotion, and then there's like thinking that it comes from
yeah,
the will. Those are the effects of the will or something. He
even
gets into.
without our putting into motion, arms and legs begin its action by force of habit as soon as we will anything, which is another cool thing to see. Is also when you're little, or if you notice how babies are, they babies initially don't even know how to keep their head up because they don't really know how to use those muscles or whatnot, right? And they don't know how to reach for something or throw a ball. They struggle with it because they don't know how to use their own body, right? And
Right, because they've
so
been in the womb for so, you know what I mean? So,
yeah,
but yeah,
but
they just don't have the experience with it,
they don't
basically.
have the
But
experience, they don't have the use. But over time you come to identify as, so this is my hand, this is my leg, this is my head. And you just go, you think about it, and when you just think about it, it just happens, right? Because you identify with it as, these are my limbs. But there's a point at which you don't see it as such. You're just like feelings going towards one way or another, as he's saying here. And by force of habit, it gets tied to will. The willing ties to the action, but it's not something that comes by default.
It almost sounds like how people will see faces in objects everywhere.
Mm.
Is kind of like how we come to um, understand the eye. Is what kind of like I've read
yeah, okay,
before.
like your you see, you're projecting, you're basically you're saying like, well, it could either be the projection or like a reification. Like I see this, I'm pulling the image in and I'm reifying it through what I know and it becomes this image. Or I see an image in my head, the thing that I see out here is similar and I'm projecting the image in my head onto the thing that's similar. I guess it really depends though on which way it's going because reification is like inwards projection, I guess, but projection itself is an outwards thing, if that makes sense.
And another important line from here is that with this concept of I, we make a whole series of erroneous conclusions and consequently false evaluations of the will itself. To the degree that he who wills believes sincerely that the willing suffices for action. So you tie the action and the act of wanting to act um, both so strongly together that we do make the error of assuming that they're both the same thing. And you will see this in people who are just like, oh, I wanted to do this, but you didn't, right? And sometimes it's almost like, oh, I really wanted it, and you're kind of satisfying yourself from having wanted it, which isn't enough because you also need to follow through. You have to follow through with the command that you're putting onto yourself, which is acting, right? It's not just wanting to, not just desiring to, willing to, but following through, right? And you shouldn't. And a lot of people will satisfy themselves by just willing it.
Here's a quote from Ecce Homo about willing and whatnot, but let me just read the whole thing. It's about how Nietzsche became who he is. An order of rank among capacities, distance, the art of separating without creating hostility, to refrain from confounding things, to keep from reconciling things, to possess enormous multifariousness and yet be the reverse of chaos. All this was the first condition of my long secret work and the artistic mastery of my instinct. Its superior guardianship manifested itself with such exceeding strength that not once did I ever dream of what was going on within me, until suddenly all my capacities were ripe, and one day burst forth in all the perfection of their highest bloom. I cannot remember even or ever having exerted myself. I can point to no trace of struggle in my life. I am the reverse of a heroic nature. To quote unquote will something, to quote unquote strive after something, to have a quote unquote aim or a quote unquote desire in my mind, I know none of these things from experience.
Uh, Mind sharing the aphorism if you
Yes,
haven't
it's
already? You could post
yeah,
it in there.
yeah, I will. I'll just repost. Sorry, I'm just
Thanks for pulling them up.
some of them I already have posted in chat. I'm just like
Yeah, that's fine.
going,
That's
yeah,
fine.
I'm just going back and forth and
Yeah, but to kind of go back to what I was saying was the
oh,
willing isn't enough.
well, here's what I wanted to say about that was Nietzsche has this thing about the will, like he hates calling it like in this instance, even though his whole thing is the will to power, like he hates the word the will. Like you'll see elsewhere in another aphorism that willing doesn't exist. It's not a thing. So I don't know. And also it's interesting because as Grimm said, um, you know, it's not about desire and Nietzsche's also here. He's like, oh, I've never had a desire in my mind, dude. So I
About
mean,
the
maybe
overcoming.
there's something to what Grimm's saying on that. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, there's some things about Nietzsche that just fuck me so much. Like, but I mean, I understand eventually why he's saying like he uses the words will and like opposites and all this shit because later on we're gonna see O Sanctus Simplicitas number 24 in BGE. Like, yo, we don't want to shrug off the awkwardness of words just to try to, you know,
Mm,
instead of saying and opposites, like instead of trying to say all the stuff that's between the opposites, you just want to say good and evil or some shit, or good and bad. You don't want to say, oh, all the gradations between this and this statistic, or you know what I mean? Like, then you're gonna
mm,
go through a whole shitload of things, and it's gonna be long and weighty, but whatever. But like the will, but he hates words that unify things into one thing,
mhm,
for example.
mhm.
But so I don't know. It's like, why does he? I don't know. I'll have to think more on this, but it's like even in this, because it's like to quote unquote will, he puts quotes around the will,
Mm.
it's like, oh well, what is the will to you exactly? And I guess this aphorism here really describes what he's
Nietzsche thinks about that.
right, exactly, the whole quote unquote unity of the word will.
Yeah. Yeah, but he talks here about he who believes with a fair amount of certainty that will and action are somehow one. He ascribes the success, the carrying out of the willing, to the will itself, and thereby enjoys the increase of sensation of power which accompanies all success. So some people, they just think, oh, just because I wanted that, it's the same as actually doing the action, and that's kind of what he points out
Right.
over there. And who commands at the same time identifies himself with the executor of the order, who as such enjoys also the triumph over obstacles, but thinks within himself that it was really his will itself that overcame them. And this is why the more times you succeed at something, you assume that your will is the reason, that the will and the action gets tied
Right,
together.
like he
And you
says,
think,
the
and
effect is moi.
yeah, yes. So it's important to separate the action and realize that willing isn't enough, and that you just take, it's almost like, and he talks about how this happens in the external world again, referencing back what I said, how the internal world and the external world kind of reflect each other. It's like the governing class identifies itself with the success of the commonwealth. So you don't look at all the things that make this command go into to become something
Right,
successful.
and you
You
you only
instead
look at the
think
end result rather than all of the
all of what it took to get there, right? It's
right.
a whole argument of the rich people saying like, oh, I
Right.
pulled
So I
myself
got
from the
we got all
bootstraps.
these scrubs to work for it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, but it's
yeah,
really
exactly.
me commanding that made the difference,
Right,
when you don't
right.
realize
Okay.
like it's also them doing this, right? The social structure of many souls.
Yeah,
um
no,
So
I like that.
I guess you only notice it when that like commanding and obeying hierarchy breaks down,
yeah,
because then
when
things don't like go well.
yeah,
I
just
guess.
because you thought of it, it doesn't happen, and then you're upset, and then you
Yeah.
realize like, hey, thinking about it isn't enough to make it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like when you're playing piano or something and you're trying to think of you're too in your own thoughts and you start making these mistakes,
Mm.
like when you're too conscious about your actual art or your performance. And
And then
that's
you can
why,
no longer
like
obey.
in martial arts or something, when they're like, oh, you got to be out of your mind. You're not trying to, you're not out of your mind like crazy, but don't think. It's all about instincts, really. It's thinking takes too long versus instinctual. It's like
How do
you're
you
gonna,
tie it to this? Are you saying that there's too much of you identifying with the commander, and then you're not really following, like carrying out the action
yeah. It's like
itself?
oh, oh, do I block? Do I kick? Do I do this? And it's you know what I mean. It's like you're
Micromanaging in a
yeah
way?
you're trying to micromanage your own commander, but it's like, yo, dude, you gotta You just got to quiet that shit out. And 188 and BGE 188, he talks about the art of letting go. That all like tyranny and training like instills into us. Like, yeah, we have this self-discipline and this passion to do all this training and whatnot, but we also, once we go to do the art, it's the art of letting go that actually gives us the 1,000 laws of whatever we're doing to create the painting or whatever the fuck we're doing with whatever discipline that we built into ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, if
Yeah.
you're doing painting, you know, you have all these little tricks, and or with music even, you might be really good at creating your own sounds, or
Mm.
you know what I mean? So
And I also love how he defines morals here. Morals being understood as the doctrine of the relations of supremacy under the phenomena of life comes to be, under which the phenomena of life comes to be. So that's what morality is, in a sense of like a reflection of this hierarchy of like who gets to command and who is following and whatnot. That's in a way what morals are. Um, Very interesting way
okay,
of
like
putting it.
an attempt to be the commander.
Yeah, like being like, I am the one and these are my commandments, right? It's
Yeah,
the
okay. I
10
mean, that makes
commandments,
sense. You know, that's
literally.
what he talks about, you know,
Yeah.
against dogma for, and the whole reason why he hates dogma is basically that, right?
Yeah, you're
And
claiming that this
Yeah,
person is always, or this will is always supreme.
right. The dogma is the one objective truth of the world, when perspective, as he says in the prologue, is a fundamental condition of life.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing, like back to what we were saying earlier about there's like this piece in Zarathustra, War and Warriors, where he says, when your thoughts succumb, your uprightness will triumph thereby.
Yes.
And I think that means like when you finally silence down, you can be that, or like your commanding and obeying is in alignment better, I guess.
Yes. Like you're not having resistance, but there's no distractions between the commanding and obeying when you
Hmm.
quiet the mind.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're thinking about all this shit, you're interrupting the process of the instincts, of the commanding and obeying instincts.
So, which aphorism is it, if you don't mind pulling it up? I'm just curious to see how Nietzsche references the whole idea of quieting the mind, of quieting these other resistive wills.
It's just one small bit in War and Warriors,
Yeah, war
Thus
and war.
Spoke Zarathustra.
Okay.
I can link it if you want me to.
I can pull it up, otherwise it's fine. But that's interesting. So I guess that is the equivalent of not micromanaging and letting go, as you said.
There's another aphorism somewhere, I think maybe in the gay science, but it's all about, you know, a lot of people like to talk, or a lot of people don't like silence because that's when their minds start
All these other
talking.
wills.
Yeah, exactly. There's all these like, that's when the mind gets loudest, is like
Mm,
when you're the most quiet, because that's when you come out. You know what I mean? It's like,
mm,
otherwise you're just trying to distract yourself with all these other things, like, oh, let me go do this or that, or you know what I mean? Instead of having
mm.
your own reflection and ruminating time and all that stuff, you're just going out, distraction after distraction after distraction.
Is it better or not good? Like what is,
Well,
I
when
guess,
Nietzsche says he's working in Ecce Homo, he says he does not afford himself any distractions at all. Like, he'll lock himself in a fucking room away from everyone. So, at least when you're trying to get work done, distractions are hampering. So,
especially external
right,
distractions, right? You're going to
right.
have internal distractions, but like I
Yeah,
want to go
obvious.
have a snack or I want to like do something else. But yeah, at least keep the external noise down. Anything else anybody wants to share about Aphorism 19 here? Or any of the thoughts shared so far? If not, we'll
Ozzy
go.
might. He's got
Ozzy?
some boxing experience, so maybe he knows some shit about, like, you know, muscle memory and the instincts and whatnot.
Yeah,
But you may not even be here either. So
I
whatever.
like that whole line. What is it? Up until you go on the stage to fight, you're practicing and whatnot. But once you you're thinking through everything. But once you step onto the stage, you stop thinking, right?
Right,
And
right.
just instincts taking over. You trained so that your brain can be automatic and know what to do, rather
Well,
than you
also a
thinking
lot of
what's
times,
happening.
like nowadays, boxers and shit, they'll have other people that are good at like, you know,
Hmm,
same height as their opponent that they're coming up against, and those opponents that they'll be training against in the gym that are like same height, same weight as their opponent or whatever,
hmm.
they'll have their opponents throwing the same moves that they're on the guy that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that the guy is gonna love to
Hmm,
throw at you. You know what I mean? So you get
hmm.
those instincts down and all that shit in the
Yeah, yeah.
training. So yeah, I like what you were saying there.
All right, we'll go into aphorism 20, which is also a heavy one. Let's see. He talks about, let me see. So this is I wanted to hear what Crocs has to say about this as well, because Nietzsche kind of brings up this interesting point of how um, philosophers generally um, come to the same conclusions or similar points of thinking, of deducing to the same relationships or whatnot, over throughout history, that we come to kind of evolves towards similar idea. Um, he here talks under an invisible spell,
Yeah,
they always
I see what
revolve
you're
once
saying.
more
He's
in the same orbit. Yeah.
like
However,
um
independent of each other, they may feel themselves with their critical or systematic wills. Something within them leads them, something impels them in a definite order, one after the other. Um, to wit, in innate systematic structure and relationship of their concepts, which is very fascinating. Come from Nietzsche because he's so anti-system, but at the same time, here he mentions how even though philosophers are thinking that they're doing their own things, or they even try to do their own things, that they keep coming back into the same orbiting the same stories, the same questions, same thoughts, and coming to a similar structure, basically the innate systematic structure. Um, yeah, and here he talks about Nietzsche. I want to research this a little bit more, but Nietzsche says this happens because owing to the unconscious domination and guidance by similar grammatical function, that everything is prepared at onset for a similar development and a sequence of philosophical systems, um, just as they seem barred against certain other possibilities of world interpretation. So he's saying that the reason this happens is not because, uh, or at least he's not willing to state that there is one system or there's one thing. Rather, it's a reflection of our limitations with languages or abilities to do so with our language. Um, and the reason I want to research this is because he says that it's highly probable that philosophers within the domain of the Ural-Attaic languages, where the concept of the subject is the least developed, look otherwise into this world. They might not think about the world in the same sense. They might come into different philosophical uh, systems than what the Westerners or even the Easterners have combined, brought together. And I don't know how true this is, but it's yeah. I'll let you guys talk a little bit about it if you want to share.
um well, another thing is like the whole recognizing of the idea. It's like like philosophers have this thing where they hate. He talks about, the whole historical sense that philosophers hate, and they turn things into concept mummies. So it's
Mm.
like these concepts are eternal and immortal or whatever through the whole idea of Kausasui or whatever, and it's like they just get repackaged in different ideas, and this is like Reason and Philosophy 1 and Twilight of the Idols is like the whole concept mummy and their whole Egypticism of, stuffing an idea and making it immortal or whatever, and that it just gets used over and over again because they don't have the whole love of the historical sense, which is also one of it's like Hath number 2, the historical sense thing. But he discusses that in several threads throughout his philosophy. I think there's even something on the historical sense in BGE, maybe. But there's definitely a historical sense in Twilight and in Genealogy of Morals that he talks about.
Mm.
Probably elsewhere too, but I'll
Yeah,
post the thing from Hath.
yeah, please do, because I've been meaning to look into this more, and because Jung kind of mentions how like our belief systems and whatnot stem from how our brains developed. So Jung kind of thinks it more because of how our brains are, like we evolved from common ancestors and whatnot, and our like circumstances of existence made our brains develop in a certain way to lead to certain beliefs, and so we always are limited or restricted to certain beliefs that we are not even aware, or we're more inclined to think a certain way because it could be a combination of what they're both saying, because our brains are developed a certain way similarly, or as Nietzsche says, it's a thing to do with our languages. But yeah, I'll read more into this as well. Yeah.
I just hit Control or Control V or whatever to paste and the book discussion. Sorry.
Yeah, I saw it. I just quickly looked over it, but I'm gonna read more into that. Yeah. Yeah, because I want to see what Croc says about this as well, because he was.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely got some good opinions on all this. Obviously.
Yeah, he's gonna pull from
It's
multiple
a shame
different
that he's
books.
not here. It's a shame that he's not.
Yeah. He got caught up with his family. All right. So, anything else people want to share about Aphorism 20 before we go to 21? All right. Hold in there, guys. Only a couple more. All right. Okay. So, Aphorism 21. It says, I wrote, don't use cause and effect as an explanation, but rather purposes of designation and communication.
Well, I don't think that Nietzsche completely disagrees with cause and effect, but there's a lot of errors in our conception of cause and effect, and that he goes into in Twilight. But let me get into 21 real quick. I'll pull it up.
It says one should not wrongfully. Wait, let me highlight it here. 21. Yeah, one should not wrongfully reify cause and effect as the natural scientists do, or whoever like them now naturalizes in his thinking, according to the prevailing mechanical doltishness which makes the cause press and push until it effects its end. One should use cause and effect only as pure concepts, that is to say, as conventional fictions for the purpose of designation and communication, not for explanation. Yeah, we had a similar discussion about this in book discussion, about how you shouldn't confuse cause and effect as like that is the real cause. That's really what's happening. But
It's like saying World War One started because Franz Ferdinand was assassinated.
yeah,
It's like
Yeah.
that's
It's just like, it's just such a fucking dude. Don't even get me started on that, man. Like, you just opened up a can of worms with me, bro. Like, good lord, bro. Don't even open up that can of worms with me.
but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I do. Because, I mean, Germany had to protect its asset, which was, we're building the Berlin to Baghdad Railroad, which goes through the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire just got fucking crumpled into dust and everything's falling to shit now. And we got to protect our own fucking assets. And y'all fucked us, and, now you're moving against us. So what are we going to do? We're going to still protect our fucking ability to get down and build this fucking railroad because that's what we're going for broke on in our economic plan. But anyways, that's a whole different fucking.
Yeah, and even that would be like one way to describe it, but then there's even more undercurrents of
Oh yeah,
politics.
absolutely. I mean, that was just one of the small things because it's
Yeah.
like the Berlin to Baghdad Railroad. You got to think about it at the time. Railroads were the leading mobility solution of the time, and Germany was going to have the first rail to petroleum when fucking Britain had to sail halfway around the fucking world, all the way around fucking Africa at the time because they didn't have the Strait of Hormuz or whatever. Like, yeah, they were like, nah, dude, that's a huge threat to our power. Boom. But, that's just one thing. There's a fucking thousand other things that came into play, obviously. But
And I think that's what he's kind of saying here, why cause and effect are so hard to like make a definite statement about like the causality of something.
yeah.
and also I guess he also argues that it's almost like a deterministic world of like this leads to this, that leads to that, and it's just like there's nothing else happening.
Right. And there's no strong or weak wills either in that whole like
Situation. It's just
right.
life. You're a victim of existence, right? You're just like
Right.
life happens to me. I'm just a passive.
The way I see
person.
it with Nietzsche is like the strong will is the free will, and the weak will is the will
victim,
bound to
basically.
it's the slave because they're bound to
Yeah.
compulsion, so it's
Yeah.
like
And they're just like, this is how things are, and I need to like bend to it rather than resist against it, right? Because
right. And like I think it's aphorism 86 and BGE, fettered heart, free spirit. What he's talking about there is like, our binding to our passions, like our fetteredness, our discipline, that gives us the ability to be free. Otherwise, if you ain't got that, and this goes with 188 also, it's that whole tyranny, that self discipline, that long obedience in the same direction that gives us that whole meaning to life, whether it's foolish, divine, like he goes through a whole bunch of things like art, dancing, whatever's world transfiguring, like that's
because if we're not doing the willing, then we're being willed by default, right?
yeah, you might resist it, right? There's resentment, there's turning inwards about it, but yeah, there's the tension, I guess, that still builds. And he talks about how this is a misuse of the idea of cause of effect, the unfree will of, and to just bring in somebody else who was inspired by Nietzsche is Viktor Frankl. He says, between the stimulus and the response, there is space. In this space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So that's where the strong will shows up of like, just because things have been this way doesn't mean it has to be that way. That I want to express myself. I want to discharge my own strength, not just bend over for how things have been, right?
And that's like the willing backwards. The worst thing for the will, it's like poison and kills your drive, is when you wish things were different than they had been because your will can't do anything about it, so it just
Yeah.
like flounders.
It's hypothetical thinking, right? Because you rather live in this metaphysical world of like, hey, either in the past where things would have gone a different way, or in like a quote unquote future where I'm in heaven and I will get vengeance for
Yeah,
whatever is
exactly.
happening to me.
You're not
You know,
living, and not that Nietzsche's like, oh, always live in the present, but it's like, you're
you're
projecting
coping.
yourself into these like back worlds, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
hinterlands, these concepts, rather than being at an occultation of the world, rather than here in the world. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? You're not here living.
yeah. It's like you said, it's a matter of strong and weak wills, and there is no like unfree will or free will. uh, yeah, there is no rule of law. Okay, let me see. Anything else, Dad? So this is also, it is almost always a symptom of what is lacking in himself when a thinker senses in every causal connection and psychological necessity something of constraint, need, compulsion to obey, pressure, and unfreedom. It is suspicious to have such feelings. The person betrays himself. So that's that's kind of what I was mentioning before when you say that A always leads to B, B always leads to C. It's when you state things like that in a deterministic mindset, that is almost a confession of yourself as being weak, of being weak-willed.
Yeah, it's like
Because
you're not doing. It's like, well, not that you're the doer, but it's just like,
you're just saying this is the state of things and I'm just going with the flow of
yeah,
things.
exactly.
I'm
I'm
not
going with the
somebody,
flow of things, not actually producing an effect upon the
yeah,
world.
which is an interesting take because I wonder if people who are more prone to think in terms of deterministic mindsets are more likely to be a slave type person where they're just like this is how life is, and why you can try to do be different or try to change things, but what's the point, right?
You
Because those are your
can, but
thou
here's the thing
shalls.
with that, like determinism can be like you can trick fuck yourself into determinism such that you don't think, oh, like, you can be determined that, hey, I'm determined to do well. You know what I mean? Like it's like you have all these positive determinations about you rather than like I can't. It's more like a
It's my fate to do well in a
right, right.
sense, right?
It's almost like
I'm
I'm going to
destined to
turn
be
out
great.
well. I will turn out well. Not that you can aim at that, but it's kind of like, you have this kind of background like, oh, I'm going to try to do well. You know what I mean? It's kind of like building a certain integrity within yourself of it's
Like
like it's
I
like your
guess,
own code at that point, I guess. It's like
I mean,
producing
people
a
have
personal
used.
code or something. I
I
don't know.
think in Buddhism, they've Zen Buddhism was Vivek talks about it. Like in Zen Buddhism, that was used to kind of make people into better soldiers because they were kind of told in a sense of like you're meant to kill your enemies, and this shows up to bring another religious group into this in Hinduism with the. I don't know if you guys know the story, but there's a guy who in Bhagavad Gita he's basically given a choice, like he has to kill his own friends and family, and he's torn because he's like, I don't want to because they're my friends and my family, people who care about, but that's also his dharma, his duty, his fate. That's what is destined for him, right? So he's torn in between, like, what do I do? And it's reinforcing the idea of like you're meant to follow your footsteps, right? You're meant to go a certain way. That's your fate. And you can see this in other countries with the idea of like mandate of heaven, right? Like of God gave me the right to rule over this country, right?
Well, even in
Like,
the Greek, though. But like, here's the thing: the Greeks believed that time was cyclical, and like, and the vision and the enigma of "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," one of my favorite passages of all time by Nietzsche. Um, like, we get into the point where he's discussing, hey, time. There's the gateway of this moment, and then there's the future and the the eternal return of time or whatever. And he's discussing like, hey, there's no shame or guilt and the gateway of this moment for your actions because it's like say it's destiny because it's like whatever action you
yeah,
choose is going to be, you know what I mean? That's what's already
yeah,
been written in destiny or whatever. So you can kind of like you can free yourself from shame and guilt through the idea of determinism in a way, but not like, you know what I mean? Like you just start building up all these like positive things and it's
nourishment
like
for it.
how the man turns out well. It's like there's no struggle.
Yeah.
You just
And
have
that,
these drives and these ways of
yeah.
thinking, and
But
it's
it
this
can be
plant,
used
and
in a positive and
this
negative
plant
way, either
turns
to
out
be
to be this
considering
beautiful
yourself
exotic
as a
thing
victim,
because it has
or
all these
considering
like
yourself like to make yourself feel
well,
less
yeah, well
guilt or
nourishing
no guilt
drives
from
underneath of it,
committing a crime. Like you're meant
like
to
it's like
stab somebody,
soil that
right?
the
So
roots grow
what's the
up
point
in
of feeling
almost.
guilty? The guilt comes from dissatisfaction of like, oh, I could have gone a certain other way. Yeah, but why did I do this? Did I make the right choice? Right? That's taken away from you because there is no choice, right? And they actually, another reference to a TED Talk video, they
Right.
showed that,
And
let's
that's
say
what the
that
pale criminal is.
you,
Oh, the
when people were
dissatisfaction
given
of
a choice of like
not doing
A
it.
and
Yeah,
B
exactly.
in terms of like buying a pair of jeans, and or you were just given a free
Right.
pair of jeans, right? People who just had no choice were happier about that, even if it didn't exactly fit their needs, rather than the people who are given A or B choice. So you think that having more choice makes you happier because you get exactly what I want, like what you want. But it's the opposite. The more choices you have, the less likely you're to be happy about it, because you can't say, "Oh, fate brought me to make this decision." Like if you got a free toy, yeah, you'll just be like, "That's great," you know? You'd be like, "I love this gift. This is the best thing ever." But if they were told you like, "Yeah, pick between these three gifts," you're gonna be like, no matter what you pick,
Right, right. No,
um,
I get what
you're
you're
going
saying.
to be like
It's like,
that.
oh, I was given this gift out of nowhere
Yeah, grass
rather
is
than me
always
choosing.
greener, right?
Yeah.
I think someone else said that line of like, you do or don't do it, you'll regret both, right? It's like it doesn't
You
matter.
might be like, oh man, I could
That's
have
what
done something
comes
else with
with
that other one.
having a
Like
lot
when
of
you come
choices.
across,
It's the
yeah,
opportunity cost. You're
exactly,
always going
exactly.
to give up something because you chose something else, right? And the deterministic thinking allows you to escape the guilt of that by saying, "Hey, I was always meant to do this." All right. Anything else to talk about
Right, right.
aphorism 21?
I just want to share my personal idea on, or just a note that I have come to realize this year in like different, mainly through politics and people's conceptions of the world. It has become like very
Mm-hmm.
obvious to me that it's
Yeah.
essential to be able to endure ambiguity and not arrive to these absolute conclusions, which
But
relates
it
to
becomes
determinism.
it becomes
in my
very
opinion.
difficult, right?
Yeah,
Like
no, that's
the
pretty good
Nietzsche talks about this,
to
about how
resist
there are
ambiguity. Did you say
circumstances in
to
life when
resist
you have to make a
ambiguity or
choice
to?
where
No,
indecisiveness is the
to be
error,
able to
right? Being
endure
Yeah,
like
to
the deer in the
ambiguity.
endure. My
headlights,
fault.
being like, oh well,
Not to
both are
resist,
valid.
to
This one
endure.
is like you're weighing options too much instead of the person who goes, hey, this is my choice. This is the perfect choice ever, and then you just go for it, right? And so that's where it is a cost benefit of like, is it better to have this mindset of I'm picking this and going with it rather
Yeah.
than like leaving yourself in this ambiguous, I could do this or that, and just keep staying there, right?
Yeah, well, you just
Well,
said in
it
that
doesn't have to
Mm.
follow that
So
way.
you're saying is
You can make a decision
so just
because you
consider the
realize
fact
the
that
ambiguity.
there
I think
are multiple
it is the
possibilities and
uh,
making a choice and
the
sticking with it,
inability to endure
um,
ambiguity,
right?
which
Rather
leads to
than being indecisive.
indecisiveness,
Would you say
or which
that kind of sums it
can
up?
lead to indecisiveness.
Or
Um, well, I think it's like about an emotional state where
mm, you are the
you are
creator
able
in a
to
sense,
come
yeah,
to a
of your
decision
actions.
because you
One other quick
realize
thing I want to kind of
that in
mention
the
from
end
actually
things
Aphorism
are
20,
gray,
if you guys don't
not
mind.
black and white.
Uh,
So
what do you
it
think of
is in the
Nietzsche?
end of your
Nietzsche
own
mentions
making
here how like
to
thinking
decide.
is far less a discovery than a recognition.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Socrates also mentioned something similar where learning is recollection, which is, I just wanted to point it out as like they both kind of agree in a sense of like you're not really bringing things into existence by thinking, but and Nietzsche mentions here, where he has also mentioned elsewhere, where philosophy is a kind of atavism of like returning to the same questions, the same thoughts. Yeah, just wanted to point that out. Mm,
Um, I think I have heard that Nietzsche was opposed to that
mm.
idea, though. That he says that we are not
Okay.
like merely discovering
All right.
meaning,
Anything
but
more,
we
or
are
can we
like
go to
creating
the
it and
20
putting it
second
forward. So
aphorism?
he was like going in opposition to the
Ready?
notion of that other philosopher. But I don't
All
know
right.
the
Let's
specific
see what I
source.
share. What I have here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I like your points, Grim. They gave me
Thank you.
some things to think about. Like the whole one about desire.
One thing that comes to mind, also because you're bringing up martial arts, is this thing about ambiguity. I think in martial arts you have to be. I don't personally practice, but in my conception of it, you have to be open and loose in order to use the opponent's energy against him. And I think you can only do that if you are relaxed. And so being tolerant of ambiguity is, to me, something like being relaxed and not tense.
Right. Kind of what Nietzsche says about the whole
Mm-hmm.
letting go. Like when you're like you're not thinking about it, you're not tense. And 188 of BGE talks about how like the artists or like the dancer lets go, and they do their, you know, they do their art basically, thinking about it and making mistakes and all that because they're starting to get tense.
Yeah, and I think that's when his call towards being free from all morals also comes into play. I think that's also a matter of being completely loose, to
Yeah,
not be tied to
I can see
some
that
kind of
because
moral.
it's like you're almost you're almost in the Dionysian oneness of your own principium, like your own principium individuonis. Like you're going into the instincts of that way in which you've differentiated yourself, if that makes sense. Because you know how he talks about the Dionysian
given
oneness
into
in
your
Birth of
instinct.
Tragedy, like how you self-abnegate in a sort of way where you're not thinking, you're like dancing or whatever. When you're dancing, it's like you don't think about it, you're just doing it.
I'm missing the vocabulary for principium. Can you describe it?
Yeah, sorry. The principle of individuation. Sorry. Principium is like the Latin term that Nietzsche uses for it, but it's just, in other words, the principle of individualization, self-determinism, that sort of thing.
Like precepts. That's where it comes from. Right.
Yeah, like Nietzsche says the Apollonian grew out of the Dionysian for the whole purpose of like the Dionysian people, the barbarians or whatever, like they individuated themselves through the whole idea of the Apollonian or whatever. That's where individuation comes from or whatever. It's the first aphorism of
I don't know how you
or
have the
Birth of Tragedy.
aphorism memorized like this, but that's great.
Thank you.
Actually, it's the second.
Okay,
my fault.
so
First one's about
going
overcoming and
into
the opposites or whatever.
this aphorism, he talks about how how we make the error of saying how nature conforms to laws, as physicists talk about it, but this is also bad interpretation because there is no nature is just everything. It doesn't conform to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was saying, like think of all the shit you can experience out in nature. Like it doesn't really
This is a
conform to any
false
real
interpretation
laws
because
or
there is
whatever.
no right way
It's
or wrong way
indifferent,
of nature.
really, is what
It's
he
just
says.
whatever
And
is possible is
the one about the
natural.
Stoics,
Right? It's just
about imagine being as so indifferent and godlike as nature or whatever. Right.
Dyson.
Or
Dionysian.
he says in Birth of Tragedy 2, it's like the whole Birth of Tragedy 3, the whole Apollonian evolved out of there's the titanic forces of nature or whatever.
Yeah, while you pull it up, I want to just
hold on, let me pull it up.
continue with this. Also want to say how okay, go ahead.
All right. I got it right here. That out of the original Titan thearchy of terror, the Olympian thearchy of joy was evolved by slow transitions through the Apollonian impulse to beauty, which arose out of the Dionysian. Like, because we were the Dionysian barbarians, and before we used to have the whole concept of the wisdom of Silenus was to be cherished because, nature's this unforgiving fucking thing. There's no safety in it. Then we created or not we, but humans, humans created the Greeks, the Grecans, but not the Grecans, but the Greek, they created the Apollonian forms that withstood the Titanic power to die young or to never have been born at all comes into effect because, oh, hey, we've now transfigured existence in a way, we've individuated
I
ourselves
have to read those
out of nature,
aphorisms. Sounds interesting.
basically.
2 and 3, yeah.
Well, okay, so, but
Hmm.
yeah, but it's like the Apollonian is like, so the Dionysian
Mm-hmm.
chaos, but the Apollonian discipline. You see what I'm saying? So it's like the Apollonian discipline is what shapes that Dionysian chaos into something more. It tempers out the destructive portions of
Mm.
the chaotic elements of those passions, the decadence in our passions. The discipline helps temper out the decadence in our passions so that we actually individuate into
Yeah, I would.
something more rather than
So
devolve
you
into
need
something
the
less. At least
Apollonian
the
side
ones
to
of
kind of
us
give
that
that
turn out
order.
well. Right. The whole, in fact, you can't have the Apollonian
Mm.
without the Dionysian. Nietzsche goes into this further in Birth of Tragedy, I think 9. But it's like he talks about
Mm.
how Euripides tried to make completely Apollonian plays, but they just didn't have the
Place, yeah,
same
yeah, yeah,
effect as the whole Apollonian Dionysian. Yeah, when there were equal parts Apollonian and Dionysian, that was when tragedy was at its heights. So it's like, you know, there's this whole overcoming. It's the whole twofold, like
yeah. Mm-hmm.
something's the higher is born
Um,
out of the lesser.
Another quick thing I wanted to add something that I learned today. I mean, I don't know how much of it is true, but I was watching this video where they were talking about schizophrenia, and schizophrenia has something that is like highly disordered thoughts. And what they struggle with it is that there is no order in their thoughts. It's almost like a dream state of the unconscious kind of taking over, of like multiple different um, drives, I guess, of pulling you all different ways. So it's almost a Dionysian state
Yeah.
where I never thought of it that way. I would love to read more.
Oh, it is absolutely.
Mm.
I've posted the beginning of Anti-Oedipus in here a couple times, but he the Deleuze is talking about this schizophrenic out for a walk, and it's all about the
Mm.
schizophrenic is almost before the man-nature dichotomy. It's like he's the undifferentiated egg, and they have different bands of intensities that manifest around
Mm-hmm.
the body without organs because they're an undifferentiated egg. You see what I'm saying? Like they're undifferentiated. They're the body without organs is an idea from Anthony Artaud, and the way he describes it is it's like you're almost floating outside of your body. Like you're just laying there, you're thinking, and it's like you almost have that out of body experience where you like float out and you're not identifying with
Is that
anything
they
at that
don't
point. You're
have?
just
Is Are you
this
saying that they don't have this whole
undifferentiated,
sense of
like,
unity with their drives, or?
yeah, it's like the way he just details Judge Schreiber and how Judge Schreiber
Mm.
talks about it. He was an actual judge and he developed schizophrenia, but he started writing about it himself. But it's like when Judge
Mm.
Schreiber would feel sunbeams in his anus, that was him saying, that was him thinking that God wanted him to be a woman and have anal sex, but him on the receiving end. And but then he'd have a different kind of intensity across his breast to be when he wanted to nurture people with his breasts or something, you know what I mean? And just these
Face.
different bands of intensities
Yeah, I
around his
would,
body. I can
because I know
post this in
Deleuze. Don't want to go
book
too far
discussion
away, but
or other
Deleuze talks a
philosophers
lot about
actually. I'll post
schizophrenia, and he's
that.
written books about it too. And I just don't.
Absolutely, and that's like the whole point of schizoanalysis is like trying to Like he describes schizophrenia as the universal producer. You see what I'm saying? Because they're not
That
differentiated into any one thing. They
okay.
universally
I've never heard of
produce
it from
through
that
different
perspective. So
bands of
yeah, if you
intensities.
want to share that,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll post
yeah,
some of
and
some
yeah,
of his
the
work
idea
in
that
the other
schizo
philosophers section
is
for
kind
you.
of in everybody, but different spectrums. Some people having higher intensities, but yeah, it's still such a great topic to dive into. So much we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, the reason why I really like it is because it's like when he talks about the schizophrenic out for a walk, he's talking about, oh, there's this portion where he's talking about the schizophrenic is let me pull it up. I got it right here in books discussion. All right. While taking a stroll outdoors, on the other hand, he is in the mountains
Mm,
amid falling snowflakes, with the gods or without any gods at all, without a family, without a father or a mother, with nature. Everything is a machine, celestial machines, the stars, a rainbow, and the sky, alpine machines, all of them connected to those of his body, a continual whir of machines. He thought, it must be a feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound life of every form, to have a soul for rocks, metals, water, and plants, to take into himself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that bathe with the waxing and waning of the moon, or breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon, to be a chlorophyll or a photosynthesis machine, or at least slip his
mm.
body into such machines as one part among the others. Lenz has projected himself back to a time before the man-nature dichotomy, before all the coordinates based on this fundamental dichotomy have been laid down. He does not live nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no such thing as either man or nature now, only a process that produces one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machines, desiring machines
Mm.
everywhere, schizophrenic machines, all of species life, the self and the non self, outside and
This is
inside,
Deleuze, huh?
no longer have any meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Share the reference if you
That's
don't mind.
Deleuze.
I wanted to kind of see how Deleuze looked at it, and yeah, sounds great.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's
Eh, honestly, that's a very poetic approach to schizophrenia, but it's just a crazy person. If I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of like calling a scattered radio signal
Oh,
or
well, the
a
reason why he
fractured
brings
TV signal
this
beautiful
point
or
into
something.
schizophrenia is because
There's potential to get something
he
meaningful out of it,
develops
but it
a
is just
technique called
nonsense. It's just
schizoanalysis,
a
and it's,
destruction of something that's
you know what I mean?
useful.
It's not so much, oh, let's be all schizophrenic, and you know what I mean? It's not trying to glorify the actual disease of schizophrenia. It's just trying to combat the whole idea of psychoanalysis, which he
right.
sees as an Oedipal idea that that
So
that
he's
creates a
against
neurosis in
psychoanalysis,
people. You know what I'm
right?
saying? So,
Deleuze.
but um, Deleuze is against psychoanalysis. He creates schizoanalysis to
Okay.
destroy Freud's psychoanalysis, basically, because he says he shows. Well, Deleuze
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
attempts to show. I'm not sure if he does or not. I'm not the best. I just, you know,
Mm.
someone may be able to defute it or refute it, not me. He's a better philosopher than I am, but he attempts to show that hey, the whole concept of schizophrenia or
Mm-hmm.
psychoanalysis causes neurosis within the
Okay.
patients. because it's basically the father and mother projecting. Like it starts with the father and
Yeah,
mother
I'd love to
projecting their
learn
shame and
it
guilt onto
because
the
there's a lot
child,
of.
basically.
I was listening to this audio, Audible called Hidden. Let me see, get the name. Mm, yeah, it's called Hidden Valley Road. This family that had 12 kids, and out of them, 7 of them had schizophrenia. Uh, yeah, that's the highest number, like ratio wise, of like because people
Jesus,
used to
dude.
think, oh, it's just people, is it nature or nurture? But this case, they had, yeah, in the end, one of them ended up only being considered bipolar, but 6 of the 12 children had schizophrenia, and I just finished listening to it. It's great because they go into this debate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a friend. Her name's Kaisha, but it's like her mother's schizo. She missed it to at least, not to like. She's got kind of some sort of paranoia, but not like heavy into the whole
Yeah,
schizo. But then like 2 of her daughters have
yeah,
schizophrenia. You know what I mean?
really,
So
really,
it's like, but
and
she
they go
has like
into
5 kids or whatever.
whether it's genetic or
Um,
it's like,
and
yeah, but that's for
yeah,
another
so
time. We'll
it's
continue
interesting.
in the other philosophers for that, but definitely one of my favorite topics
For
currently,
sure.
at least. Okay, now one more aphorism. Let's see. Let me see anything else. Yeah, this is where before we go into 23, this is where I mentioned in the bottom of 22 um, that. Nietzsche says, supposing that this also is only an interpretation and you will be eager enough to make this objection, well, so much the better. So that's the thing of constantly people keep coming up with, like, oh, why does Nietzsche say that there's no absolute truth? Then talk about Ubermensch and talk about, will to power and all the stuff. Aren't these truths? That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I mean, this Nietzsche kind of responds to it entirely at the bottom over here. So of like how it is all interpretation, and if you want to make an objection to it, go for it. You can choose what you want. Um, yeah, but Nietzsche's interpretations are more valid than personally valid. You relate with
Yeah,
it,
no,
right? And it's
I agree. Like a lot of my life experiences, like yeah, exactly. And that's what makes Nietzsche so powerful in the first place is like he's not building some bullshit metaphysical system that you have to like sit there and really think
mm,
about and all this and you don't really have life experience with it because you can't experience it in reality. Nietzsche's like a lot of us
exactly.
have probably read Nietzsche and were like, "Yo, dude, I know exactly what he's
You were
fucking
all in
talking
think.
about. He
Yeah,
just put
yeah,
words, you know? He just put words to something that
mm, yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah, yeah.
hated. Yeah, it's like,
I was
oh
just
man, I hate it
listening
when
to
people
Jung,
fucking
and he
do
did
that.
the same
Thank you,
thing.
Nietzsche.
He
You know what I
basically
mean? And
goes
it's
into
like,
this, and he's like,
yeah.
then says how, like, if you disagree with me, just sit and think about it and ask your own inner self, right? Like, is this ringing true based on your experiences, your thoughts, whatnot, right? You don't have to take my word on it. See if it connects with you, right? And uh,
But another issue with that is like when Nietzsche says this, yo, what this really means is if you read Nietzsche
mm,
and you take your
mm,
own definitions for the words he's using,
yeah,
wrong. You know what I mean? Like you gotta know what Nietzsche's saying by
absolutely.
every single fucking word. Otherwise, you can project into that word, like, or you reify the word a different way. Like,
Mm,
oh, like the will to power. So many people think it's about coveting
yeah,
power
yeah.
rather
It's
than that internal order of the drives, It's like, well, it has nothing to do with coveting power. Maybe if that's part of your internalized drive, sure, but
yeah,
for another person, it could be expressing art or some other, you
exactly.
know what I mean? Like the will to power for someone else is completely different than this other
It
dude, you know
depends.
what I mean? So
Yeah, It
Sure,
could
it
be
could
what your
technically be
interpretation
coveting
is
power,
to an
but
extent, but
that's not
not
what will
like
of
you
power
could be
is. You know
completely
what I mean?
wrong as well. Then that's the point of him writing so much about it, is that you can really study it and be like, hey, it doesn't make sense with this. It doesn't, his idea is more explained in this area where it doesn't make sense. And that's what I love when, having talked with you, you're able to pull different aphorisms to support your interpretation of his work, and yeah, which is great. Um,
Though sometimes I speak way too fast without considering the second half of what I'm trying to say or whatever. It's like I get the instinct, but then I never I don't ruminate
I
on
mean,
it
as
enough
long
to
as you're
say
open
what I
to
want to
going back
say,
and
and
forth,
then I just say some dog shit. Like when I kept ending like earlier. I kept saying something that I was like, oh no, that's you know what I mean, and I was just like, oh, I was confusing people, and some of the stuff I was saying after I said it, I was like, no, and I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna stop because I don't even know how to express myself. But I mean, honestly, one thing about Nietzsche,
yeah,
anything you should learn
because knowing the
how to
words, knowing
express
what the words
yourself.
mean, being picky about your words, understanding them. Um, yeah. Let's see. We didn't go into some of this. I want to quickly mention also, at the bottom of 21, he talks about more about how the deterministic mindset is a reflection of weakness. Um, Goes into how it's a way of them, um, you know, it's a way of weighing people not giving up their right to their merits, like pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, or people who want to blame um, someone else for their problems. Um, like the victim is like, oh, the as Marxists would argue, like, oh, the society was, the I am oppressed, I'm whatnot. You see yourself from the mindset of um, the weak-willed. Um, yeah, so something interesting to go into. All right, back to 23. It's kind of, I think it's, let's see. Yeah, he talks about how this is also kind of going back to what I shared about, like, there is no better time to look into these things, no better time to discuss these things, because he says to understand, let me pull it up in the other one. Um, says to understand it as morphology and the doctrine of the development of will to power as I do, nobody has yet come close to doing this even in thought, insofar as it is permissible to recognize in what has been written so far as a symptom of what has so far been kept silent. So that's the problem, is like when we push things off into the future, we don't really discuss things. It never gets taken up, right? Nobody else. It's almost like being like, oh, that messiah idea of like, oh, hero will come in the future and do this better, right? Someone else will solve this problem. I don't need to solve this problem. And
Right.
yeah, so yeah,
The dragon,
you're not
basically.
good enough, right?
The
And
thou
that's
shalt, like, sit the
um
fuck down, bro. You're not good
they talk
enough.
about it in Nietzsche podcast. He says the same thing of like, people who have actually changed values in the past, none of them were good enough, right? No one was good enough, right? Peter, Paul, they weren't good enough, right? They did it anyways because they claimed it's from God and whatnot, and they changed how you thought about whether or not they're worthy enough. But nobody was good enough, right? So uh, there is no like magical hero that's coming to save the world. That's the whole point, is that there is no God. There is no like hero coming to save you. It's you, right? You have to do something about it. Um, but yeah, and
Right, like, and one of the things I quoted from Ecce Homo in the book discussion thing, it's like, yo, hold on, let me pull it up. It was oh yeah, I am the reverse of a heroic nature. to will, to strive,
Hmm.
to struggle, to aim, to desire. I've never had any of that shit in my mind, or I can point to no trace of struggle in my life. I am the reverse of a heroic nature. To will something, to strive after something, to have an aim or a desire in my mind. I know
Hmm.
none of these things from experience. So yeah, like the whole heroic thing, like a lot of people think that's
But
like,
that's
oh,
that's the thing is they
the
separate
Ubermensch is this
themselves again
heroic
from this like
figure of, you know
ideal,
what I mean? And it's
right?
like
It's not me, it's
there
some
is no
hero in the future that'll save the world, and I
exactly.
just need to, hope and pray for that guy to appear. It's the same thing as Christianity, right? It's like, why did you do this if you're not gonna see it
Yes.
completely, right? Like, um, yeah. So that's the whole thing. Is like
Yeah.
nobody's coming to save you. You just stand up and do what you think you want to do, right? Do your drives, and
Yeah. You manifest, you manifest your own future basically, in a way. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
even that's shitty with words. Yeah. You don't manifest your own future, obviously, but
You reveal yourself through
there's a
existence,
certain
basically.
amount of,
Mm.
you give yourself the opportunities, like you got to put yourself in the position for opportunities to
Mhm,
happen
mhm.
and for you to do action and opportunities basically. I guess willing. I don't know. Like what would you say starts first, the will,
I
or
think
would it be like an
so.
opportunity
Nietzsche has
within the
spoken
will,
elsewhere about how
or
like
maybe
there's a lot in life that happens due to chance, and it's not really you deciding on it, right? Like for example,
right?
exactly.
Well, he says the
Yeah.
Ubermensch would
So
be one of the luckiest strokes
absolutely. So
because
you
luck would just
need the proper
be on his
gradient,
side all
right?
the time.
To use
It's just
Jung's
like
term of like things have to be aligned in a way for things to work. Like you just happen to be, for example, let's say that you you end up being the best carpenter in the world, right? But for that to happen, you should have had some kind of world experience where you were around carpentry, right? Even before that desire even came up, you had to surround yourself in that environment of somewhere, or you watched a YouTube video. You should have had a reason to watch that YouTube video, right? That's just like some things are just in a way just happens, right? And you can you
absolutely, and that's exactly what he talks about in that same aphorism from Ecce Homo before. He's talking about, yo, dude, I became a
yeah,
philologist
yeah.
just by doing philology. It was an accident. I was just doing philology one day and my professor was like, yo,
Yeah.
dude, this work right here belongs in my fucking museum and we're going to put it in it.
And
And that's when Nietzsche became a philologist. He
I
just
think Nietzsche
was
mentioned
doing
elsewhere how
it
like he
and
started
boom,
writing because he
he
was
just
reading all
became
the
it
stuff
one
that
day,
was out there, and he was just like getting upset at like the nonsense that was being put out.
Yeah, he came up with well, he didn't come up with the moral, but he says in letters his only
Yeah.
moral is mihi ipsi scripsi, to write for myself or to write for oneself. And that was
Yeah. Sorry to
he,
make you
he
pull
says
up
it in a
so much
couple
today,
letters,
but
like three.
really
I could
appreciate
pull
it.
them up if you'd like,
Yeah,
but
yeah. But
yeah.
exactly, it's
Oh no, but or it's
it's
it's all
really
good.
really great how, but that is the mix of the randomness, or rather the abundance of life, creating the gradients that you need to you know blossom as a person, right? And other that's someone had mentioned how like I don't know if Nietzsche mentioned it, how like you worry about like all these people living in third world countries that don't have the opportunity. There might be a great Einstein in there, or there are a great philosopher amongst them, right? And that's the thing, is that the gradient doesn't fit their uh,
Right, and that's why sometimes he says sometimes, you know, just the way society is
exactly.
structured will keep a noble person from rising because it's like they don't have those opportunities and
Yes, exactly.
the
So
opportunities to take
that's
advantage
that I
of those
think is
luckiest
kind of
strokes,
what
you know?
happens is that you need to have the circumstances match up, and you also need to have that possibility, the potential of the desire to grow in you, right? That's another part. So it has nature and nurture in it, because you could have a perfect environment and no desire and it gets nowhere, right? And the thing about it is that if you had to pick one or the other, it probably would be nature, because nature can almost, as a creative type, show up in a more varied environments than a very specific one all the time, right? Even if it's not 100% ideal, if your strong will is strong enough, you will learn how to navigate it, right? And you will figure out how to an extent, right? It's not like you couldn't live in the caveman
Right, right.
days and be a Nietzsche, right? Just yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
mean, the whole thing is you navigate it with your instincts,
yeah.
really, right? And that's a sort of feeling more than, I mean, it's like, yeah, but it's like,
Hmm,
there's
hmm.
still a navigation, it's like
But
with
to
art,
a certain extent, you have to kind of
you're
have the
navigating the
previous
picture as you're
guides,
painting
or
it,
you have to
it's like,
learn a little bit, right? And then improve, hone on those.
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I was talking about, the tyranny and then the letting go, like the
Hmm.
letting go allows the tyranny of the
That's
discipline to just
beautiful
come
way
out,
to
you're not
state it. Yeah,
thinking about it, it's
that's
just
exactly
that
it.
flow.
Um, like you have that instinct in you, and you're just providing the room through the tyrannical drive, um, to make that possible. Um, yeah, let me see if anything else to share. But yeah, let's see. He talks about also how these good and wicked drives, that the good impulses that you have come from these wicked impulses. Um, let's see. And a proper physiopsychologist, and see, that's another thing that should appear in the future is people who are in the profession of physiopsychology, which doesn't even exist yet. Um, Yeah, but a proper physiopsychology has to contend with the unconscious resistance in the heart of the investigator. It has to have a heart against it, even a doctrine of reciprocal dependence of the good and wicked drives. So it's basically you have to know your own biases that you bring into it and almost have a resistance to those biases that you're going to produce when you treat someone. And which is really cool because Jung talks about similar ideas about how when you try to interpret somebody's dream or someone's way of what they're struggling with, you can't think in terms of you, because it's not how you see the problem that matters. It's more, yeah. And your understanding is not going to be
Right.
helpful,
Otherwise, you'll be
like
judging them
especially
if you
with
think in
cultural
terms of
differences
you.
or environmental differences. You'll never be able to say some advice that just clicks with them, because you don't know what it is to be them.
Yeah. There's this Alan Watts actually has a thing where he talks through one of Jung's he gives a Jung gives one of his speeches to like a bunch of priests or
Hmm.
clergymen or something, but he's talking
That's
about this exact thing that you're talking about right now. But
Yeah,
I
I
can pull
think
that
that's a very
video up
important
too.
thing
It's
that
actually really good.
likely is. I would be. I would think that even today, psychologists struggle with that, of being like, are you forcing them to follow your moral mindset of whatever you think is right or whatever your drives consider as appropriate rather than theirs. Even symbology, it should be seen, especially symbology should be seen from the perspective of the other person than yours, because it's their symbols, not yours. Just yeah.
Right. Exactly. And as Wittgenstein says, all philosophy is a language game of the philosopher. So it's like every freaking philosopher has their own symbols, which
Hmm.
is really just how they use the words in particular. But you know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
it's like they have their own games with their words that they use. So you got to be
Hmm.
accustomed to that
Yeah.
game. Otherwise, it's just going to
Um.
be gibberish to you.
See. And yeah, this will make him feel sick because it's a dangerous insight, and that's how he ends the statement. And yet, even in this hypothesis, far from being the strangest and most painful in this immense and almost new domain of dangerous insights, there are, in fact, 100 good reasons why everyone should keep away from it who can. Nietzsche is very good at like telling people to stay away, but at the same time attracting them to the idea.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, he's like,
Yeah, which is,
not
but
everyone can
normally
handle this
when,
kind of shit, bro,
yeah,
and you're one of
normally when
them,
someone says that, you're like,
or
this
you're
is some
not.
dumb
It's,
idea.
it's kind of
When
like,
he says it, it's like, oh, he's actually valid. This is a tough idea to chew.
yeah, exactly. You're like, yeah, exactly.
Because he's
And he's
saying
saying,
that good
not
drives come
everyone
from
should fucking
wicked
chew it
ones.
because
Like,
they won't
uh,
be able to handle it,
if, however, a
So
person, yeah,
the lower
yeah,
is, or the
yeah,
higher is born out of the lower, the Apollonian out of the Dionysian, all of that stuff. He makes it very clear in a lot of his philosophy. In fact, if you look at how his philosophy is even set up, in Ecce Homo, he details that beyond good and evil starts the negative portion of his philosophy. He talks about before that, before Thus Spoke Zarathustra, dawn and up
mm,
human all to human through dawn is his yay saying years. Then after that is his nay saying years. But
mm,
it's like the later half grew out of his first half because
mm,
the negative portion of
mm,
his years he talks about as the transvaluation of all values. That is the negative portion of
yeah,
his
yeah.
deed.
Yeah,
And
but he
I mean,
mentions
I can
here,
obviously bring that
if,
up too.
however, a
So
person should regard
in the
even
book.
the affects of the hatred, envy, covetousness, and the lust to rule as conditions of life, as factors which fundamentally and essentially must be present in the general economy of life. And he mentions, and must therefore be further enhanced if life is to be further enhanced. Does that mean you have to go more into the negative to enhance life? And it says he will suffer from such a view of things as from seasickness. I mean, because this kind of goes to Jung's line of like to reach up to heavens, high heavens, you also have to go deep down. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, well, Nietzsche says that too. The
to
further
soar high. Yeah.
you can only climb. I think it's in Zarathustra, but it's like the further you fall, yeah, you have to climb out of the high.
So do you
You have to
think that
climb the
in
heights out of
here,
the
when he
fucking.
says like, oh,
The
these
further you fall, the
negative
further you have to
things, they
climb,
must be
basically, or
enhanced if
the.
life is to be further enhanced? Does he say enhanced in a negative way as well? Perhaps. I guess it could be seen either way.
Well, in Birth of Tragedy 1, he talks about how you know the the twofold overcome each other. So basically, the most destructive elements of each are tapered out from each other when you have the twofold going on. Like if you just go straight up
Mm,
Apollonian, then it's too
mm,
rigid. If it's too much in the Dionysian, then it's too destructive. But when you have the 50-50, the Apollonian's more
yeah.
malleable that way, and the
It's kind of like
chaotic isn't as destructive. So they don't they allow they they allow each other to go higher and higher. So it's like eventually when that drive's about to you'd have to determine when it becomes decadence and when
Mm,
it's life enhancing. You see what I'm saying? That's the difference with, or that's where it really matters with Nietzsche, when something becomes decadent versus remaining life enhancing.
mm,
Because
mm-hmm,
like for a while there, Christianity was life enhancing. You know, and then it stopped
mm,
becoming life enhancing, and that's when God became dead. That's why God died, because we no longer, felt
mm,
the need to
mm,
serve God. We wanted to
mm,
self-determine into these other things. We didn't, we wanted to serve ourselves now.
When
When
was
you needed,
Christianity
like,
life enhancing?
Nietzsche says, I think in the prologue to BGE, that we should still be thankful to them because, they've brought us to this era, right? But it's like creators, what he says is, in the olden times, this is in the New Idol, but it was creators were they who created a faith and hung it over their people in order to serve life. So it's like the creators of the Christian values, the Jews, it was to serve their life existence. And he talks about this in AC, the Antichrist 24, where he calls Judaism a morality of resentment, but he calls the
being
Jews
able to
themselves the most
evaluate
psychologically
like
gifted
this. Yeah.
people for, in order, well, yeah, in order to reevaluate the, he says, when faced with their own destruction, they chose to deny their, it was like they basically denied the world, and they took upon themselves the leadership of all decadence positions
I guess that's a
in
good
order
point. I
to,
didn't think of it that way, but
here, let me pull it up.
the
It's,
trans evaluation of like the weak no longer. Before it was more of like the strong versus weak, where whoever is mighty, who has more muscles, basically beat up the weak person. But then the
here's what it says. In my genealogy of morals, I give the first psychological explanation of the concepts underlying those two antithetical things, a noble morality and a resentment morality, the second of which is a mere product of the denial of the former. The Judeo-Christian moral system belongs to the second division in every detail. In order to say nay to everything representing an ascending evolution to life, this is to well-being, to power, to beauty, to self-approval, the instincts of resentment here become downright genius, had to invent an other world in which the acceptance of life appeared as the most evil and abominable thing imaginable. Psychologically, the Jews are people gifted with the very strongest vitality, so much so that when they found themselves facing impossible conditions of life, they chose voluntarily and with a profound talent for self-preservation, the side of all those instincts which makes for decadence, not as if mastered by them, but as if detecting in them a power by which the world could be defied. The Jews are the very opposites of decadence. They have simply been forced into appearing in that guise, and with a degree of skill of approaching the non plus ultra of historic genius, they have managed to put themselves at the head of all decadence or all decadent movements. For example, the Christianity of Paul, and so make them something stronger than any party frankly saying yes to life.
well,
So the
yeah.
Jews
I mean,
basically, you know,
flipping it
life
upside down.
life affirmation for the Jews was this whole system of this resent. Yeah, they basically had to trick fuck the rest of the world with this resentment morality, but that was the way, that was their life affirmation. You know what I mean? So, and that's how they
Yeah.
survived for that time. But now it's making mankind sick.
Well, but the Jews, per
Okay, but
definition,
at the
also
beginning
were
of
never
at the beginning
Christian.
of 24, he talks
So
about, I
he's
barely touch
just
upon the problem of the origin of
he's not
Christianity.
praising
The first
Christianity. Yeah.
things to the solution is this, that Christianity is to be understood only by examining the soil from which it sprung. It is not a reaction against Jewish instincts, it is their inevitable product. In fact, he says in the middle term, precisely for this reasons, the Jews are the most faithful people in the history of the world. Their influence has so falsified the reasoning of mankind today that the Christian can cherish anti-Semitism without realizing that it is no more than the final consequence of Judaism. So anti-Semitism is basically the same equation as Judaism. It's just the virtue that the scorpion that stings itself into the back, the backbiting virtue. That's what Judaism is. It's a backbiting virtue because it's this dogma creating thing that says you're shit if you don't live this way. Well, guess what? Anti-Semitism says the Jews are shit because they don't live this way. You see what I'm saying? So it's like anti-Semitism comes back around to bite the very virtue that created it.
Mm-hmm.
But Judaism, Christianity, it's like, and he says here, the Judeo-Christian moral systems, or the Judeo-Christian moral system belongs to the second division, and that's Judeo-Tech-Christian. So he's just saying, hey, they're both the fucking same, pretty much.
Good. Yeah. The last part of the reading is in the bottom here. It says, the person who's able to see in this way of like the good coming from these wicked drives and them, kind of enhancing each other. It's and he dares like all these. He basically warns that people should keep away from it, and then he talks about it in the bottom here of the psychologist who thus makes a sacrifice to do so, a sacrifice of the intellect, will allow psychology to be recognized again as the queen of all sciences, and whose service and preparation for which other sciences exist. For psychology is now again the path to fundamental problems. That's kind of what I mentioned earlier, how like currently we are still stuck in that mindset of thinking material wealth and material things are the most valuable thing, but because again you can grasp it, and if you can't grasp it, it's useless. That's because we're really stuck thinking in that material mindset. Of like, if you can't play with it, if you can't hold it in your hand, there's no point. But here Nietzsche makes an argument, and I agree fully with this, is that psychology is really what is behind all of this. Like the reason those materials are valuable is because there's a demand for it, right? And that demand is linked to the psychology of the person, or the culture of the society, and where that's happening, rather than some kind of innate value in that object. Like gold is valuable because people think it's valuable, not because gold has some value within itself that's inherent to the property of gold. So yeah,
Right.
it shows how like Nietzsche gets this so clearly and mentions it so clearly about how the psychology is really what is at the bottom of all of this, of like where value comes from, where what matters the most. But because science in a way thinks that just because it's so difficult to study that we have to toss it out, like we can't comprehend psychology, therefore we'll put it at the bottom of the list and instead value the things that we can study and we can make use of and consider that as the biggest thing. But it doesn't work that way, because the value doesn't come from the material things, it comes from us.
Right.
And you have to come back to the psychology to recognize this and to really enhance a society, I think it's important for us to recognize how the psychology of that society works. To really thrive as a culture, you need to know the you have to work with the psychology. You can't just be like, oh, I have all the gold in the world. That doesn't make it for a superior culture. You have all the weapons in the world. That doesn't make it the most superior culture. It makes a very powerful militant country. And Nietzsche talks about this kind of military countries, which US is also part of, because we have like 3 times more arms than weapons than yeah. So we just think that, oh,
The
we
next, yeah,
we
the
don't
next biggest
have
motherfucker
culture.
around,
However,
basically.
we don't have because we don't value it, so we're blind to it, because we're almost like, oh, it doesn't
Yeah, we
matter.
don't.
This is the
We
stuff
really
that
don't.
doesn't matter, because you can't study it, you can't synthesize it, you can't mass produce it or whatever. So you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna dismiss it because I can't study it. But unfortunately or fortunately, things don't bring happiness. It's You have to address the thing that cannot be studied, which is it'll take a while for the world to understand this, even though Nietzsche clearly mentions like this is what needs to be done. Is some psychologist in the future or whatnot has to kind of do this work to bring psychology back to the front as a queen of all sciences. But now currently psychology is not even considered science. So even more so.
Yeah, well, the big thing with him, like in his day and age, like
Yeah.
psychology was still metaphysics, you know what I mean? Back in his day and age, there was no real hard science on the science of psychology, and like there's more now, but it's like, you know, Nietzsche's metaphysics isn't metaphysics, it's just psychology. And there was that one aphorism that we went over earlier that talks about how psychology, it talks about
That's a good
psychology
way to
and
put it. How
metaphysics and
Nietzsche's metaphysics
whatnot.
is not
But that's why,
philosophy in
you
a
know,
sense, it's psychology. It's how you think, or how you look at problems, how you look at language.
yeah, that's why I hate when people are like Nietzsche has metaphysics too. I'm like, yeah, but it's all about psychology, bro. Like that's why he calls himself a psychologist. Uh, like first, like in Ecce Homo, he's like, yeah, I am a philosopher, I'm
Yeah,
a philologist too, but first and foremost, I'm a psychologist, bitch. Like, you know what I mean? So, but that's his
yeah.
metaphysics is psychology, and he's just really good at reflecting on it because you know, it's like it's the experiences that he's reflecting
I
on
said
rather
so.
than just
Yeah.
some bullshit occultation of the world
Yeah,
system that
exactly.
he's making up. You know
It's
what I
not
mean?
some made up world. It's not that. It's more pure metaphysics, as I consider. It's like made up things rather than and I think what is lost here is like people who don't have that. I don't know. They don't have that inner thought process or inner connections made. So when you read Nietzsche's books, they can't relate with it, right? And so they go, this is just metaphysics as well, right? Because they, in the same sense, they can't relate with other books like Bible or any other
Right.
metaphysical thing. They look at Nietzsche's stuff and go, it's the same, but it's not the same. You can only understand it if you have had the experience to connect those dots, to relate with it, right? In some sense. Because you can't, it's not for people who just sit in a room and just read the book and go, understand it completely. You have to live it, right? You have to know what is it that he's talking about. And that's the only way to do it, is to live that life. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Graham.
But I guess Graham or Graham, I don't even know how to pronounce your name. Yeah, it's like I get why you asked why Christian, like, oh, how is Christianity and all that like a, life uh preserving system, especially when it's like Christianity is all against the instincts and all that shit. But I just meant for that like one small period of time, like where it actually flipped the transvaluations. Because like you're right,
In the
Nietzsche's whole fight against it is because it doesn't serve life anymore. It's just nihilistic to the point. And it's already had its effect to
we need
serve
to
the life of
dismiss it and
those
find something
that
better.
needed to
Yeah,
live. It's like, but now we need to,
yeah,
we
it's
need
no longer
exactly.
suitable.
We need something that's life affirming now.
Yes. Well,
There's no longer, we no longer serve God anymore.
for
It's,
people who can
God's no longer
recognize
the
it, though,
number
at the
one
same
supreme
time,
guiding
they're still
principle
Christians in
in
our
our
age.
life.
It's still the major religion, I
Right,
think,
right, right. I mean, there's
unless
still
it's
some
Islam.
who
It doesn't matter.
obviously
They're
do
all
live that way. So.
Judeo-Christian religions. It's still the most popular, even though there's a decline. And you see that when you don't have any better systems,
For
people
sure.
will pick even the system that doesn't make any sense. And that's what you see with the newer generations returning back to almost Christianity. But you can't return back because you know it's a lie. You can't change how you think about it, right? Just because you wish to go back, you can't.
Yeah. And in fact, this is actually one of the points in Thus Spoke Zarathustra
Yeah,
when,
yeah.
remember when he goes back to the forest and he's carrying the body of the rope dancer? It's like he goes back to the spirit of Christianity. And this is a point in his own life, like he's stating like, hey, after my failure with, you know, my first book and all that shit, like I kind of
Mm.
revisited Christianity, but then I went on my merry way, for a short while, and then I had this eventually, he wakes up in the virgin forest he after he takes the bread from the old hermit in the woods or whatever, that was the same guy that he was
Mm-hmm.
discussing with as he was coming down from the mountains, that same hermit, so it's like, oh, I'm going back to revisit this, but he couldn't because it's just like there's nothing there, there's so he took the bread and the or whatever and the water, and then he just fucking
Yeah,
he took a
yeah.
little inspiration from it, and then he woke up one day in the virgin forest. Like even in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wakes up in a different forest. Everything's overgrown. And then Zarathustra's like, "Yo, I know what I have to do. I have to steal from the herd. I'll no longer be the herd's herdsman and hound. I just gotta produce work that
Mm-hmm.
steals from the herd. I'll be called a thief, but whatever, But it's basically like you said,
It's not
going
possible.
back to the
That's the
spirit
thing.
of
It's like
Christianity is just
it's
like
not
it's
going to
not
give you the same
enough.
sense of fulfillment it did because you know that is a lie. That you're coping, right? You know that this isn't enough. You already know that. It's like it's wishful thinking that I could live in the past.
It's going back on a certain
Yeah.
amount of
Yeah.
it's like
It's
you
like
held a certain integrity
Heraclitus
and then you
saying,
went
right?
back on
Man
it,
cannot
it's like
step into the same water twice, because man is different and the water stream is different. So it's the same idea of like we've been through that phase of like
uh,
we had the trans evaluation happening with uh, Judaism and then Christianity coming afterwards. As it's another extension of it, of making all people are God's people, and you've done it already.
it's like, can you
It's
really
like
transvaluate back to something you've already transvaluated out? Yeah, exactly. You've already transvaluated out of that
you
mode
can't.
of
It's
thinking. So
impossible.
going back
It
to it,
doesn't
you're
work
still
that
going to
way
have
because
these
you've
remnants of that
psychologically passed
transvaluation
that
out of it. You know what I mean?
mindset, right? It's all
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like it's impossible. It's not a thing that you have to move forward. Is what I'm saying, right? You cannot move backwards. Yeah, but people still argue like, oh, why don't we?
Yeah,
Why is
right.
God
I got
dead?
you.
There's still Lot, and it's as Nietzsche said, like, we live in the shadow of a dead God, and people are just either refusing or not fully. I mean, a lot of them are not able to understand it yet, and that's where Zarathustra says, "Oh, I've come too early. You don't have the years for me." But yeah, and then
Right,
he says
right.
that there will be a time when even the
I
deaf
will be
and
born
the blind
posthumously
will
or whatever,
understand.
something like
Like
that.
no one is going to be like, "Oh, this isn't what's happening." And we are not quite at that time where the whole world is like, "Hey, this is a pointless thing to hold on to religion because God is dead." But that is not the time yet. It will take forever, you know. And yeah, it's basically
Right, right.
my thoughts. But yeah, I mean, this was great, man. This was great. It was good to have you talk about these things and bring in aphorisms and Rem, if you're still awake.
You know, I'll try to write down shit more so I
I mean,
don't
you
like
were on
just
point.
come off the fly
You were
with,
on point.
my instincts. You know what I mean? I'll try to explore my thoughts more. Yeah, I know, but I mean sometimes I was stumbling over myself and I kind of like ended up cutting people off because I was like,
Well,
no, no,
you
no,
have a
this, and
better
I
idea
I
of what you
confused
want to
myself
aim
even,
towards, right?
and
More
then
than
I
like
don't know, I was just
I'm only going off from how you practiced, and I thought it was great. But if you think there's differences you want to make to it, go for it. Of course, anything keeps improving.
oh yeah, I mean like you and Graham have put up some good, counter arguments to some of the things
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have said earlier. So it just gave me some, food for thought. Because like Graham was all about the whole, I don't know if it's all
Mhm.
about desire, and Nietzsche's over here, and Ecce Homo was like, I've never had a desire in my, you know what I mean? So is it like he's
Mhm.
never had the feeling of that desire because he's always satiating the
Which is
drive, you
that
know what I mean?
aphorism
Or
that
is
you're
it
talking
because, you know what
about?
I mean?
Nietzsche
So
said that?
I don't really know how to interpret it, but it's like, yeah, Why I'm So Clever, Ecce Homo, section 9 of Why I'm So Clever. But it's like, it's a longer one, but I put out a little section
I
of it. I
think I
think it's
read
in
that
the
there, like with
off or
reference there. I'll
the
have to
book
check.
discussion. Yeah,
You're
I
really good
posted at
at like
7:45.
pulling
Ecce Homo, Why I'm
aphorisms. I
So
don't know
Clever,
what you
section
do,
9.
but hopefully you'll share it some point.
Oh, I mean, I was just a cryptologist in the Navy, man. I just have a thing for, really, it's
Yeah,
just
that's great.
fucking rote repetition, man. That's all it is. Like, I got so obsessed with Nietzsche that I'll listen to his shit when I'm sleeping, dude. Like, I found a aphorism that Croxy was talking about and we were looking for in my sleep because the words just popped out. I mean, I
I
fucking
love it.
woke
I
up and I
love
was
it.
like, these are the words
That's
that
awesome.
Croxy was talking about. Boom. And I woke up and boom, it
That
was the
is
same fucking
awesome.
aphorism. And it's ingrained in me permanently now. You know what I mean?
I
So,
I
because I
hope I
woke
get
up
there,
like,
man. That's
ah,
incredible.
and so it's there permanently in me. Like, I know exactly you know what I mean? Yeah. This is but I mean, I have the OTM to do that, because I went into the military. Now I got my military benefits and all my bonuses and shit were thrown into the stock market. So I spend like my girl the other day was like, dude, you spent
Mm.
like 24 hours almost just on philosophy. Like the fuck, bro? Like, give me some
Well,
time. And I was like,
that's
I know,
great.
I
That's
know,
great.
I know. But I mean,
Yeah,
me and her have been together for 7 years, so you know,
but like we were
yeah.
talking.
So. But I'm just that way, like, and it's like I know what's his name thinks I don't do a whole lot. Like Ozzy's like, oh, you don't
Yeah,
do anything, man. It's like, dude, there's a reason why I understand philosophy so much more than you, and why
yeah,
I
yeah.
have all this ability with Nietzsche's own fucking shit and
But
pulling
do
all
you know
these
what's great about it?
aphorisms.
Like
It's
we were
because
just talking about,
this
you
is what I
needed the.
do. I do philosophy. Like, yeah.
Huh?
About the material versus the
Huh?
immaterial, oh, yeah, that's what you were talking about, and that's why I was giggling about that too, because it's like, it's like exactly like you said, so many people are focused on the
Yeah,
material rather
and
than
the
the whole what the immaterial will bring you. And
yeah.
it's like I'm already good with money and all that shit, so I can survive. So I don't need to worry about the material, dude.
I mean,
Like
now you
the
can
only thing
try to.
oh, not the
It's
only thing I give a
it's
shit
you
is
know
the
about
material, but
Maslow's
it's just
hierarchy, right?
philosophy.
And you see, yeah, I feel like a lot of instinctual drives, like
Yeah,
the priority of the
Maslow's hierarchy
drives,
of
go
needs.
based on those hierarchies, the way I see it. And on top is self-actualization, which is like once your needs are met from bottom up, right? Of like the basic instincts of
Right.
shelter and food and all this stuff, and then you go up of like, okay, do I have enough money and all these things to not worry about my near future, right? And the last point is now I can focus really on just improving myself, right? Like
Right.
understanding. Yeah,
Exactly. It's less distractions in your mind, you know? It's like boom, now my own self can speak about what I want to
yeah,
speak with.
yeah.
And this is why I allowed Grimm's shit to hit me about the whole desire thing or whatever, because it was like,
What, the
or
Christianity part?
maybe not the desire, but God, no,
Yeah, we were talking
shit. What were
about
we just
whether
talking about? I'm
how
sorry. The
Christianity
whole
is uh, could be seen as a religion that affirms life.
I know, but there's something.
No, you mean the
It'll come to
desire
you, I'm sure.
versus
That, but I think you brought up another
the
point that,
end goal, the power.
yeah, it'll come back to me. I just that happens all the
But that's
time with me.
great,
I'll
though.
have
That
a
means
thought
it's
come
it's
and
a
then it just goes
form
away because
of
another thought comes up, and
abundance
I'm just like,
overflowing,
shit.
right?
I just love.
Which is a good
Yeah.
thing, as long as you don't get caught up in the full. You still have order in a sense of making sense of it. Yeah, yeah. Good talk.
In
Good
a
talk.
sense,
Chris.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, the whole boredom. It's like when I was talking about boredom, and Grem and Kat brought up, oh, it's not about boredom or whatever, and I was like, yeah, they're right because
No,
like
but that's a good.
when it's
But
your
the thing is,
passion,
in
you're not
some
gonna be bored
cases,
with it. Like, what the fuck
boredom
was I thinking? You
can
know,
lead
like,
people to
you
act,
know what I
but
mean?
you kind of burn out, right? Like
Yeah, and I get what
that's
you're
not
saying. Yeah,
enough.
but
Is the
it's
point,
not
right? You
about
can't just be like bored into
over.
creativity,
You
right?
know,
You
it's not
have to
about.
be
Yeah,
want it, right?
exactly.
You have to desire
Right,
it. Yeah. No
right.
one can force to make the
Exactly.
best
Like you have
music,
to
you
find
know,
it
like
fun to be
you kind
doing
of
this
have
in the
to
first place.
enjoy.
Like
I mean, not these
philosophy.
days anymore. It's
But
just pop music, but
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I
doing it
mean, I
out of
get what you're
boredom.
saying. It's like you're not going
You
to
have
be
to have
the
a
most
passion for it.
fantastic artist if you're fucking, you know, yeah, or if you're, yeah, or even if you're just like beat into it, like a, you know what I mean? Like you're
I
enslaved
mean, it's
into
kind of a, we
being an
already know
artist or
this through
something. That
history,
may
is
not be
like
your
some of the
best bet,
best
you know what I mean? It's just
musicians
like,
back in the day were one-time hits because once they became popular, the like they would basically just get bought and be told to produce 20 songs every few months, and they just put out shit because they were forced to do it, and
oh, right,
it
yeah.
doesn't have the same expression as they when they did Out of Freedom, you know.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
so boredom is just a milieu where the passion
Right.
can arise, but it's only the absence of passion, which is
Well, no,
boredom.
like as soon
So
as you
it
like
is
as
like
soon as I
a
took a moment to
inversion of
realize
it,
or
But that's
prep,
great that
and
you're
yeah,
doing
ruminate
it's
on it,
that.
like
I was like,
it's the
they're absolutely
negation.
right because you know, like you just said. Well, I know, but like you said just now, a really cool. What Grim just said now was a really cool way of describing it. It's like you said something about the boredom or like the, it's like something about
It's the
the
milieu and an
passion and the
inversion.
boredom or
Which
something like
one?
that.
Which
Like
part?
passion isn't born out of boredom or something like that. Or I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said something about passion and boredom.
Yeah, but
together.
it's getting tired. But we'll continue this in a book discussion as well, as
Yeah, I bet,
always.
dude.
But
I understand, man.
wonderful
Yeah,
conversations,
it's
guys.
getting
Thanks
late
for
for me over here in
joining in
Europe.
and sharing your
Yeah, for
thoughts.
sure.
Thank you again. Of course, of course. We'll
Yeah,
have to do
thanks
it again.
for making me think about
Yeah,
a few
I had a great
things,
time. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the only way I
Yeah.
get better with Nietzsche, by
Good.
actively utilizing his
All right.
ideas, So
Catch you guys
that's
later.
why I love these talks. Appreciate you guys.